Welcome to the International Atomic Energy Agency's first international conference on small modular reactors and their applications. My name is Anna Bradford. I'm the director of the Division of Nuclear Installation Safety here at the agency, and I'm the co-scientific secretary for this conference, along with Ms. Aline Desclaiseaux, the director of the Division of Nuclear Power. We're very pleased to have you here today, and we trust you will find the week informative and useful. We have an interesting and busy program today, so let's get started. First, please let me introduce Mr. Rafael Mariano Grossi, the Director General of the IAEA, to give his opening remarks. DG Grossi, you have the floor.
Well, dear friends, good afternoon. It's really so exciting and inspiring to see this room so full with all of us today for something which is, of course, critically important for the development of the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, to give the answer that we are all hoping it will continue to give to the crucial issues of our time: energy security, development for all, reliability, and of course, the protection of the environment through an energy source that is free of CO2 emissions that are killing our planet. All of this is converging into a very special moment. We all know it. We all see it every day. Hardly a week passes without an exciting announcement of a partnership, of a contract, of a deal, of the idea that a company or a big enterprise or a group of countries is moving decisively into adding nuclear to the existing capacities that they have, or, like many countries in the global south and in other parts of the world, acceding to nuclear energy. And not only that, but also looking into the new horizons that nuclear is offering to all of us. And the issue of the day, what brings us together this afternoon here in Vienna, in the Global House of Nuclear, the IAEA, is the small and modular reactors. One of the most promising, exciting, and necessary technological developments that we have had coming for quite a long time, but that we know now that is going to be a reality. We know it for those of us like me who have been working in this fascinating field for more than 4 decades. Small and modular reactors have been mentioned and talked about for many, many years, considering them a possibility, something that could happen at some point in a not very clear future. Now, as I'm saying, this is happening. We know it, it's in the press, it's everywhere. But when we talk about small modular reactors here at the IAEA, we do it in a different way. First of all, with a great sense of responsibility, because we know that behind the interesting features, behind the alluring aspects of this technology, there are issues that we have to be looking after. And no place other than the IAEA is the good place to do it, because in this house, like today, with this packed room of women and men dealing with energy issues and with nuclear issues, here is where we look at the problem from all possible angles. And this is what this first international conference on small and modular reactors is going to do through its packed program of activities, conferences and lectures and poster presentations that we have, coupled, as always, here at the IAEA with industrial presentations, which I'm sure are going to be very, very important. So, ladies and gentlemen, there are important aspects that we have to be looking after. As I was saying just now, these days we are all looking at how industries, and in particular AI and the IT industry, the big firms in the world, the Googles of this world and the Microsofts of this world and the AI of this world and the Microsoft and all these companies are now knocking at the door of nuclear. They are not coming to nuclear for an idea or information. They are requesting nuclear to deliver. And this is something irrespective of the industry, because there are others, and I will be referring to that in a moment. And this is an epochal change, ladies and gentlemen. For those, like many of you in the room, nuclear has either never been questioned or has been in the defensive for many, many decades. Now, there is a market out there, there is a demand out there with a degree of uncertainty on whether we are going to be able to deliver on time and in the scale that is required. And as I was saying, it's not only this industry. I've been talking to the steel industry. I've been talking to the shipping industry. I've been talking to the coal energy companies in the world, and they are all looking at us. They are all looking at nuclear as the most direct, efficient, not the only one, but the most direct, efficient, reliable source of energy that they need to have what we all want to have, which are intelligent, integrated energy systems. And this is what nuclear can do. What we are going to be doing during these days here in Vienna is, of course, looking at the technological aspects and also looking at other issues, which, by the way, we have been discussing today, because every day and every minute there is something important going on at the IAEA, and for those regulators in the room and for those who are from industry, maybe you were attending a meeting on nuclear harmonization and standardization, that it is a part of a process which we started 2 years ago, knowing and cognizant of the fact that if we are really going to have a successful modularity in nuclear, if we are going to have reactors of the rack, so to speak, then we all need to change, because safety comes first, always. But the way to do nuclear safety must change as well. And this is the challenge in front of us. No important trend in economy, in politics, or in anything else comes without some discomfort and some need for adjustment. And this is what is required from all of us. We are doing it here at the IAEA. We are working very hard, trying in an interdepartmental way to provide to you and to our member states the services they need, the assistance they need. And when I talk about regulation, this is where we are bringing to the regulatory community by having a small modular reactor regulators forum and other platforms like this, where we are looking at what is needed so that regulators can work together in the most efficient way. It is not easy. We are going to be confronted with situations, projects where a reactor is going to be built in one corner of the world to be exported to somewhere else. And this somewhere else may be a place without a long nuclear tradition. So how do we weigh, how do we balance these things in a way, again, I repeat it, that never compromises nuclear safety, but that wants the whole thing to be a success. This is one of the big challenges that we are going to be dealing with and that we are going to be working on when it comes to regulation. There is also, and this is for me very, very important, the issue of international financing. And we are going to be hearing from our friends from Ghana now and from other developing countries that do not see the modularity perhaps in the same way that big data and data centers are looking at. They are looking at SMRs as a way to mobilize their economies, to do it in a faster way, to try to abate CO2 emissions. And of course, since this is the IAEA and we are, as part of a statutory mission, obliged and committed to promote the peaceful uses of nuclear energy for all in a fair way, we are going to be looking into that. And this is why we already established a small modular reactors platform, which is already working from our nuclear energy department and with the participation, of course, of nuclear safety and other units in our house, trying to give the answers, the advice that is needed for these countries. You remember our milestones approach, this approach that allows countries that perhaps did not have any nuclear at all to become confirmed, successful nuclear users and beneficiaries like the United Arab Emirates and other countries. And now we have, of course, updated our approach, our milestones approach, to have specific angles that are looking at modular reactors. So, dear friends, the regulatory aspect is very, very important, and how to guide countries is very, very important. The financing is extremely important, we know. And this is why, through the IAEA, we are trying to open doors into the international financial institutions for traditional nuclear and for new nuclear, so that this indispensable part of the equation is available also for nuclear, as it has been for many years for renewable energies, and rightly so, let me say, but it must also be there for nuclear. It's not only a matter of fairness, it's a matter of efficiency, and it's a matter of intelligence. Dear friends, SMRs are here. The opportunity is here, but we are not there yet. But we have come a long way. We have come a long way from nuclear rejection to indifference, and to this moment where people are saying we need to accelerate, like they did in Dubai, we need to accelerate nuclear. Okay, we knew it from before. Never mind. We are going to do it, and this is why we are here. I wish you a very successful first international SMR conference at the IAEA. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, DG Grossi, for those very relevant and thought-provoking remarks. I would now like to welcome to the podium the Honorable Collins Adomako-Mensah, the Deputy Minister at the Ministry of Energy of Ghana, for his remarks. Mr. Adomako-Mensah, you have the floor.
Good morning, or good afternoon. I still have my Ghana time with me, sorry. Mr. Raphael Grossi, Director General of IAEA, Ms. Maria Kosnick, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Nuclear Energy Institute of the United States of America, heads of institutions of various nations, SMR technology country vendors, distinguished invited guests and panelists, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I bring you warm greetings from Ghana, a country at the meeting point of the equator and the Greenwich Meridian. I would also like to thank Director General Grossi for inviting me to address the first IAEA International Conference on small modular reactors and their applications here in the beautiful and historic city of Vienna. Ghana appreciates the fruitful cooperation with the International Atomic Energy towards harnessing nuclear science, technology, and applications in various areas, including health, agriculture, environment, human resource development, and more recently, nuclear power in support of sustainable development in Ghana. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, higher levels of economic development could be directly linked to greater electricity use, access, reliability, and affordability. The importance of access to affordable, reliable, and clean energy for achieving sustainable development goals has always been underscored. We can therefore not overemphasize the role of nuclear energy in addressing our development challenges and meeting our climate goals. For Ghana to make significant gains in providing clean, renewable energy, there's the need to consider all options, including nuclear energy. With the current level of growth in demand for energy and the global quest to transition to cleaner fuels, we can no longer rely solely on our traditional sources of generating power. Ghana has therefore resolved to include nuclear energy into its energy mix, in line with the country's short to medium-term national development goal of meeting the growing energy demand as well as reducing the greenhouse gas emissions as outlined in Ghana's nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. Indeed, Ghana's desire to harness the power of nuclear technology for peaceful purposes, such as energy generation and applications in industry, agriculture, and healthcare to drive the country's development agenda, dates back to the establishment of Ghana's Atomic Energy Commission in the 1960s. The decision by Ghana to revive its interest in nuclear energy and its associated technologies followed the report of a presidential commission in 2007, which recommended the incorporation of nuclear power into the energy mix of Ghana. This led to the establishment of the Ghana Nuclear Power Planning Organization in 2012 to steer the implementation of a nuclear energy program and to address all the issues associated with nuclear energy planning. Ghana firmly believes that nuclear embarking countries must establish laws and regulations governing nuclear activities to enforce safety and security standards in order to guarantee the benefits of nuclear power. In view of this, Ghana established the Nuclear Regulatory Authority to oversee issues of nuclear safety, security, and safeguards. In an age of artificial intelligence, we encourage the IAEA to continue to develop robust safety protocols to prevent the possibility of accidents and incidents through physical and cybersecurity measures to protect nuclear facilities from threats. I would also like to emphasize the importance of human resource development in providing the needed workforce to manage these facilities through specialized educational programs and training for nuclear engineers, scientists, and technicians. Ghana, since rejuvenating her nuclear power program, has, through the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission, established the School of Nuclear and Allied Science to provide the expected human resource needs of the nuclear power program, including the needs of the regulator and promoter institutions. Graduates from these establishments have become the workforce of our nuclear institutions, such as the Nuclear Regulatory Authority of Ghana, Nuclear Power Ghana Limited, and government policy-making institutions. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, under the astute leadership of His Excellency the President of Ghana, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, Ghana is following the IAEA's milestones approach in implementing its nuclear power program and is currently in phase 2. In this regard, we have carefully considered and assessed the various nuclear power technologies with a view to their possible adoption. In doing so, we have also engaged our development partners who are experienced in these technologies and signed memoranda of understanding and framework agreements with them with the aim of cooperating on the peaceful uses of atomic energy and the construction of nuclear power plants and deployment of related technologies in Ghana. On the 13th September 2023, U.S. Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for International Security and Non-Proliferation, and Ganza, joined her Ghanaian counterparts to announce further U.S. support for establishing in Ghana a small modular nuclear reactor regional training hub and center of excellence for the sub-Saharan African region. In August 2024 in Kenya, a cooperation agreement between Nuclear Power Ghana and Regnum Technology for the adoption of North-scale nuclear technology in an industrial enclave was signed to advance our quest towards the adoption of SMR technology in Ghana and for Ghana to become a hub for SMR tech supply chain in Africa. Some other SMR technologies under consideration by Ghana includes the floating SMR nuclear power ship by Rosatom, which has shown prospects to be easily integrated in the small grids of many nations in Africa by plug and play to quickly increase electricity access and reduce energy poverty. The 200 megawatts high temperature gas-cooled reactor by CNNC of China and the ISMR by South Korea all look promising towards the effort to triple the world nuclear power plant installed capacity to combat climate change as well as addressing energy poverty. In a more recent development, Ghana has identified 2 candidate sites to host Ghana's first nuclear power plants and a backup site. Also, Ghana, after the review of our request for information to the vendor countries, has identified the nuclear technologies and vendors for our first nuclear power plants, and this will be made public in due time. It is our expectation that the continuous support of the IAEA and our identified vendors will lead to the construction of Ghana's first nuclear power plant in line with our national nuclear roadmap. The production of adequate and reliable electrical power for the West African grid will serve as a strong backbone for the West African power pool, and SMRs have a strong role to play. Let me conclude with the words of Osadefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah during the commissioning of Ghana's Atomic Energy Commission on 25th November 1964, and I quote, "We have therefore been compelled to enter the field of atomic energy because this already promises to yield the economic source of power since the beginning of man. Our success in this field will enable us to solve the many-sided problems which face us in all the spheres of development in Ghana and in Africa." Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Domako-Mensah, for those important statements. I would now like to welcome to the podium Ms. Maria Korsnick, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Nuclear Energy Institute and the President of this conference, for her remarks. Ms. Korsnick, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, and welcome to the very first IAEA International Conference on Small Modular Reactors. I have to agree with Director General Grossi. With my almost 4 decades in this industry, we are at a very special time for nuclear. I want to thank Director General Grossi for having the vision to bring us all together, and our conference chair, Professor Marco Riccati, for his commitment to the success of this conference, and to the policymakers, regulators, and corporate partners who have joined us this week. We are gathered here in Vienna with one goal: to accelerate the development and deployment of small modular reactor technologies. Never has achieving this goal been more important, and never has it been more possible. We are in a new era for nuclear energy, an era of innovation and implementation. Since the dawn of time, energy innovation has propelled us forward. Think about it. From the first campfires of the Stone Age, to the steam-powered mills of the Industrial Revolution, to the electric vehicles that we have today. In that span, it's created a force multiplier effect. Energy innovation has spurred industry innovation, which has increased the demand for more energy and, in turn, spurred the need for more energy innovation, and on and on. Over the past several years, we have seen the convergence of two macro trends in the energy sector: the need to decarbonize to protect the planet, and the need for greater energy security and independence. And in the last year, another reality has come to greater clarity: the projection of huge demand for energy coming from advanced computing and artificial intelligence, as well as the electrification of the manufacturing and transportation sectors. You know, if you asked AI a question, you're using 10 times more electricity than you did a year ago when you just Googled it, and exponentially more energy than 20 years ago when you asked a book. This is our world now, and I'm proud to report that there's only one energy source that can reliably meet this growing clean energy demand: nuclear. Nuclear is clean. More than 140 countries have set a target for net zero emissions, along with nearly 10,000 companies. But the great irony of the energy transition is that we need considerably more energy. Nuclear gets us there without increasing emissions and intensifying the climate crisis. Nuclear is reliable. Nuclear has the highest capacity of any energy source, meaning that it runs at a maximum power more often than any other energy source, and it can withstand rain and ice storms, or worse. It's the only 24/7, 365 clean energy generator on the market. And because all that is true, the momentum behind nuclear energy is growing. Leaders in the public and private sectors are looking to nuclear not just as an energy source, but as an energy solution. And that's why those of us gathered here today must innovate, which is a good thing, because we're innovators. Nearly 100 years ago, we split the atom. And it was an incredible feat, but we didn't stop there. We figured out how to harness that energy and how to heat water and turn it into steam and turn a turbine and generate electricity. And today, there are more than 400 nuclear reactors operating in more than 30 nations. Together, those reactors are generating 9% of the world's electricity. In the United States, we're especially proud of our existing fleet. And as we speak, there are a few plants that were once shuttered because they were not valued for the attributes that they bring, and they are now on a path to reopening. And at the same time, we know we cannot stop there, which is why we're all here. For decades, we have been working on advanced nuclear technologies, including small modular reactors and microreactors, trying to figure out how to improve our designs and how to shrink our fabrication time, and all while maximizing the impact. And thanks to many of those in this room, I think we've cracked it. In a world that prioritizes safety, SMRs are designed for it. In a world that prioritizes efficiency, SMRs are easier to build and transport. In a world that prioritizes adaptability, SMRs can integrate with other clean energy sources. And in a world that needed more energy yesterday, SMRs can be deployed faster. There are more than 80 SMR designs in development right now. And as we continue to innovate, we must get to implementation. In the past year alone, we've made incredible progress. In the United States, TerraPower submitted a construction permit application earlier this year and broke ground on their site in Wyoming. In Canada, Ontario Power Generation began main site preparation for their first ever small modular reactor plant at their Darlington site. In Romania, the Iaea has approved the site selection process for small modular reactors at Doicești, marking a key step in advancing Romania's energy capabilities. And in India, the finance minister has announced plans for the country to build a fleet of small nuclear reactors, including the 220 megawatt Bharat small reactor, to help meet their net zero targets and power industries like steel and cement. And that's just the start. Around the world, countries are laying the groundwork to advance that next generation nuclear. Sweden is scouting for a new SMR plant. The United Kingdom has down-selected its SMR technology. The Czech Republic has selected a supplier for its program. And Argentina's Carem reactor is also well under construction. And Slovakia is working towards site selection for an SMR. You know, I recently participated in an OECD NEA session in Paris, and I was asked about supply chain, workforce, and cost issues. My answer? Build. And the same answer applies here. It's our collective goal to accelerate the development and deployment of SMRs, then our focus must be on getting more orders and building the plants. Because when we do that, the workforce will grow, the supply chain will solidify, and costs will come down. In the United States, we have our first advanced reactors with Vogtle units 3 and 4. And what we found with every new unit, the construction gets more efficient, the costs get more reasonable, the risks decrease, and the benefits increase. And in the case of SMRs, hopefully the regulation also keeps pace. Because as we all know, regulations for SMRs can be undeveloped, can be unclear, and this is a global concern, and it will take all of us working together to help regulatory bodies prepare for these new technologies. And that takes me to my final point. At the outset, I said that this is a new era for nuclear energy, one of innovation and implementation. But I also must add, this is also an era of cooperation. A year ago, at COP28, 25 countries pledged to triple nuclear power by 2050. Let us be clear, no one country, no one company can triple our nuclear capacity alone. The IAEA has been instrumental in supporting the pursuit of nuclear energy by emerging nuclear nations. The countries where a bulk of the new nuclear capacity will need to be built in order to fulfill this pledge. This is a new era, requires a cooperative effort that spans borders and sectors, bringing together private investors, governments, and international partners, all of us in this room. And that's why it's so important to work together, and we've already seen examples of this happening. Regulators are working together bilaterally and multilaterally to make licensing SMRs more efficient. For example, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, the UK's Office of Nuclear Regulation, and the US Nuclear Regulatory Commission are working together trilaterally to increase collaboration on the technical reviews of advanced reactor and small modular reactor technologies. 18 European companies are working to establish a working group dedicated to implementing SMR technology. And 14 global financial institutions have expressed their support for expanding nuclear energy capacity, including SMRs. These partnerships are what we need to help us move forward from development to deployment. The way forward, friends, is together. So yes, this is a new era for nuclear energy, and for the people in this room, we're ready for it. Keep innovating. Apple didn't stop with a desktop computer. They continue to innovate and deliver new technologies in new shapes and sizes. We got a laptop, we got the iPad, we have the iPhone, we have the iWatch. With this, Apple changed the way that we communicate and in turn, changed the world. The nuclear industry is on the verge of doing something very similar. We have safely powered the world with clean, reliable energy, and we're ready to add new, innovative designs in new shapes and sizes, new technologies to power everything from small, remote villages to large, energy-intensive cities. And as we do this, we will also change the world. This week, you're going to have the opportunity to meet leaders from around the world and network with potential partners. Seize that opportunity. This is a critical moment. We are witnessing another leap forward in human progress, just like the Industrial Revolution. But this time, instead of steam and coal, nuclear energy is powering the transformation. You are powering the transformation. Put simply, you are helping shape the industry that is shaping our world's future. So thank you for being here. Thank you for all the work that you've done and will continue to do. And now I'm going to turn it over to Anna and Eileen.
Thank you, Ms. Korsnick, for those remarks, and also for agreeing to preside over this conference. Now we have completed the opening session, and we will move to our first panel discussion, which will be moderated by Ms. Kirsty Gogan, co-founder and managing director of TerraPraxis. I now invite all of the panelists to please come take your seats here on the stage, and I turn the floor over to Ms. Gogan. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kirsty Gogan. It's my honor to be moderating this first panel of this really extraordinary conference. So it's really my honor to be moderating this very distinguished group of guests that we have today. Mr. John Hopkins, President and CEO of NuScale Power, Mr. Ramzi Jamal, Executive Vice President and Chief Regulatory Officer for the Canadian Nuclear Safety Regulation. DG Grossi needs no introduction as our host this afternoon. Mr. Orzat, it's a pleasure to have you here, Executive Vice President of Strategy and Technologies at EDF, and Mr. Zhu, who is the President of the Canadian National Nuclear Company. Thank you all so much for being here today. Mr. Grossi, DG Grossi, let me kick off with you. Firstly, congratulations on the timing of this landmark conference in the wake of a series of really extraordinary announcements from some of the largest industrial energy users on the planet, signaling their demand for clean and reliable energy from nuclear energy. But this may yet be the thin end of the wedge. As Maria just highlighted for us, this is really just the beginning. We're halfway through this critical decade, and all over the world, major industrial energy users are thinking about how to meet their decarbonization goals and substitute for the heat and the power and the hydrogen and the steam that is powering their business-critical energy services. So my question for you is, what do you consider to be the highest priorities for regulators, for the agency, for the industry to meet this moment and realize the potential of this demand? Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty. It's very good to see you again. I think in my opening remarks and the ministers and Maria's, some of these issues were evoked. I think if one had to synthesize it in a very simple way, it should be, let's make nuclear simple, which has been a little bit the motto of some of our meetings. And the idea is, again, without cutting corners or without taking approaches that could be seen as less than comprehensive, to recognize the need to adapt to a new business model. And this is extremely important. If the small modular reactor model is going to succeed, we must, without getting into a revolution, but a profound evolution is needed in terms of how to adapt the use of commercially available equipment like other industries do, how to work together so that regulators from across the world can leverage, if not accepting at face value. Of course, we are not aiming at these unrealistic ideas, but to seriously leverage other regulators' approaches and views so that when a client is looking at, it's very simple in a certain sense, isn't it? But we don't have it. This is the issue. Yeah. Because for whomever we would be explaining this, well, it makes eminent sense, isn't it? Well, the problem is that in nuclear, we do not have it. It's not an intrinsic problem in terms of an industry that didn't know what to do or was being unreasonable or inefficient. It is simply the way that the industry grew when the global market was not an issue in itself, and just a few vendors and utility-led operations did not necessarily need this kind of thing. But here, and I think Maria was referring to this, we need to be aware that is going to be a very different sort of configuration with a lot of opportunity. So I think the great thing is that it looks simple, but as one famous writer said, the most difficult thing is to cut and to make simple. And this is the art of what we need to do, to find these ways. So how to do it? Because this is the next question. Okay, it sounds very well, it sounds very good, it sounds very reasonable. So, and then what happens? Well, at least from our part, and industry will have what, and regulators will tell us what they feel. What we have done is to try to bring together all these communities together, because I felt a couple of years ago that people were talking past each other. We were all recognizing that these things needed to happen. This is a conversation we started with Xavier and other colleagues from industry here in Vienna, informally, more than 2 years ago, when they were explaining to me their frustration in this regard. So I think this is, the added value of a conference like this, the added value of the Nuclear Harmonization and Standardization Initiative, which is something that is ongoing, where we are trying to see how to bring together what are the things that can work. We know already that some of the regulators are already working together. This is a good thing, but of course, this issue, this industry of ours is global, and we need to have a configuration where all nuclear vendors and actors are there. So, the KISS principle, keep it simple.
Excellent. Keep it simple. Love that. Thank you. This is really a new market that we're discussing, a new era, which requires a very different way of delivering a very different kind of product. So, DG Grossi, just speak for a moment about investor confidence. Now, at New York Climate Week, we saw 14 of the world's largest banks indicate their readiness to start really evaluating nuclear projects. This was a very major step, a very welcome step. I know it's something that's very dear to your heart, something you've been working on for many years, and it's in many ways a triumph. But how do we ensure that mainstream finance is really recognizing that SMRs are an irresistible investment opportunity?
Well, first of all, open the conversation, which did not exist either. This is also a very important thing that we discovered. In some cases, commercial banks, and we had this statement, is very important that they are doing that. They come to us at the same time, and here is where we can help, because, of course, some of their analysts want to ascertain the safety of the whole idea, and rightly so. And in the case of international financial institutions, is the fact that for decades they simply ignored the issue. And I was very happy to be able to start to open a dialogue with the World Bank, for example. And the president, Jay Banga, who is an entrepreneur, a very dynamic person, he invited me to address the board of no other than the World Bank, all right? And I was surprised by the fact that they were recognizing that they didn't have any capacity to assess nuclear projects. Talking about the World Bank, all right? No capacity to do that. So of course we said, well, there's something that is called the Iaea, has been around for 70 years, and perhaps can do something about it, and we are trying to see what we can do. So I'm very grateful to the president of the World Bank, who has decided to open this dialogue. It's going to take time. What I wouldn't like to see is that it takes more time that need be, because the market has already decided that we are going in that direction, and we need to open these doors. So I guess that the bigger table is what we need. We started with regulators and with the industry, are going to include the operators, which of course have something to say about this, and of course why not the bankers.
Fantastic, yes. Well, thank you for all of that work. And as you say, I think the important first step is that these financial institutions are actually resourcing internally the capability to evaluate these projects. And now we need the projects. So Mr. Hopkins, if I can turn to you, NuScale has obviously been a pioneer in really forging the path for SMRs, among the first to receive a license and now applying for the 77 megawatt uprate. Congratulations on that process. Tell us about the significance of NuScale's successful NRC certification in terms of your market position.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Director General. It's an honor to be here. Just a short 10 years ago, I can remember coming into this industry. It's been a daunting challenge and a rigorous, getting through the whole understanding of nuclear. But when I came in, there was so much negativity around the notion of even small modular reactors. If 10 years ago when I mentioned it, people would roll their eyes and say it's about economies of scale, you'll never get through the NRC, a lot of things we could never do. And NuScale submitted their design certification application in 2016. What we submitted was 50 megawatts, 12 modules, 50 megawatts. As we went through the NRC process, and it took 42 months to get through it, we discovered that same machine, essentially, we're very conservative, it could approach 80 megawatts. So we went in with the NRC, we said we want to do a power up rate. And that power up rate provides our customers, from an economic perspective, more certainty than it would as a 50 megawatts. So where we are right now currently, we're ahead of schedule. The NRC schedule is the second quarter of 2025. So we're hoping we'll have that 77 megawatt approved, hopefully around July of next year. And the significance of that is it allowed us to go to the market in Romania. Maria mentioned Romania. We just recently contracted to do the FEED, front-end engineering design, for the country of Romania. And I've got to give Romania a lot of credit for stepping up and doing what they're doing, because they also have put a lot of faith in the fact that SMRs is a future for them. They view themselves as being an emerging country to come out with SMRs in Central Eastern Europe. And what promulgated that was the fact that we had the NRC gold stamp of approval. And so it's opened the aperture for us. And we are, to date, the only one in the United States who've been through that process as an SMR. In fact, we're the only one, I believe, currently submitted a design certification application. So that still has to be done, and it's coming. We've got a next wave. Last week was a big deal for us, in this country, because there was an announcement of Google with Kairos. There was an announcement with Amazon, with X-Energy. To see those name brands coming out in favor of advanced nuclear, it's huge for this industry. It certainly has benefited NuScale as a publicly traded company, and we need to continue to sustain that.
Yeah, well, that's leadership. And that's, what I'm hearing from you. NuScale has been a leader, Romania and all of the other countries that are pursuing these emerging technologies are demonstrating real leadership. And of course, then we see the leadership now from the market, from those big customers that send the signal that others can follow. You're engaging with, many customers around the world. Can you tell us a bit about what you see as the key drivers for this demand for nuclear energy and SMRs in particular?
Well, if you follow from COP26, 27, 28, two things. Climate disruption, obviously. Energy security is becoming even more critical. But if I look at and more people, Ghana now, in sub-Saharan Africa, talking about SMRs, there's a growing groundswell recognizing that advanced nuclear needs to be in the mix. We're not competing against renewables. We're complementing renewables. So I think what needs to happen with this industry, first of all, we need to get some SMRs built. That's number one. Having worked and gone through the rigor of the U.S. NRC, there will never be an NRC light. NRC's focus is on safety and health of our population and society. But there are areas that we can streamline. We were talking harmonization this morning. Working with Romania, the NRC is actually working with the regulator in Romania in helping to expedite the process. And it's not about taking anything away from safety, but it helps expedite so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I think you'll see that more common going forward.
Well, I'm looking forward to Mr. Jamal's comments about this too. But before I go on, when are we going to see commercial SMRs operating?
The founder of NuScale, Chief Technology Officer, is brilliant. He said he wanted to go forward with advanced light water reactor, because all regulators in the world know light water.
It's Jose.
He said, Jose Reyes, Dr. Reyes. He also said, I want to be able to design, build, have these in a factory where they're fungible assets. So all the risks, the NSSS, is built in a factory, and they can be shipped anywhere. And that's currently what we're doing. We've got our first 6 modules coming offline with Doosan in Korea, and we're getting ready to order our next 6 modules in Doosan. And it's phenomenal to see what they've done in that facility, not only with our forgings and our modules, but also with the helical coil steam generators. So supply chain is going to be absolutely critical for our industry, and we need to continue. And as you said, build it and they will come.
And design once and build many.
But to your question, when? We've ordered these long lead items. If you haven't ordered long lead items tonight, when I hear we're going to be building and operating by the end of the decade, we will be building and operating by the end of the decade.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, Mr. Jamal, Lots of challenges coming down the track for regulators. We're all talking about doing things really differently. We're exploring fleet deployments to varieties of sites, co-locating SMR technologies, with non-traditional. This isn't just about power generation. This is about co-locating these SMRs with industrial facilities, with coal plants, with steel plants, refineries. Can you tell us a little bit about how regulators are responding to these kinds of new innovative deployment models and siting opportunities?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to see you all. I'm the only regulator on this panel, next to my great friend, Gigi Grossi. I'll start with the fact that historically, a few years back, in my decades in the business, when we wanted to talk about SMR, all of us would fit in one phone booth. And here we are, a full room of SMR regulators, designers, and operators. So from our perspective, I heard this afternoon, three key elements from DG Grossi: uncertainty, from the Deputy Minister of Energy of Ghana with respect to the prevention, and then from NEI with respect to, call it flexibility, but I'm going to call it adaptability of the regulator. So what does this mean to a site where we are? The fact that uncertainty is, this is your biggest problem, is not knowing what the regulatory requirements are, because the job of the regulator is to make sure uncertainty is eroded by discussing and adapting and explaining the regulatory framework for the site-specific elements with respect to existing facilities where the power island will be changed into nuclear island. It is doable. It is not impossible. The role of the regulator is not to prevent accidents, is to prevent unreasonable risk associated with any of the approval. Because if you're going to think of preventing accidents, don't start, shut it down, keep it down. So the key point here is flexibility, adaptability of a regulatory framework is key. And it's key with respect to clarity. And those islands that can be replaced by nuclear islands require a specific design. John mentioned design once, and have a clear element what needs to be done. Because in Canada right now we have a potential up to 10 SMRs that are required by the provincial authorities. And it's not just international collaboration. We're very blessed that we have very strong mature regulators collaborating in order to erode the uncertainty. But at the same time, the uncertainty can be local, and that's up to the regulatory bodies to collaborate and understand. And you, the industry, don't just come to us as a designer alone. We're going to ask you who's going to operate, because if that operator is unsafe, you're going nowhere.
Very good, thank you. We heard a little about the importance of harmonization, which I would love to hear your perspective on. But we're also seeing these new customers that have demand for, tens and, more gigawatts of heat and power to be deployed very rapidly to support decarbonization of the oil and gas industry and other large industrial facilities. That's going to require a really different kind of delivery model, even products that are manufactured, licensed, fueled in the factory, and then delivered to site as a finished, completed unit. Tell us a bit about the way that regulators are starting to think about that kind of very large-scale fleet deployment, including potentially deployments on barge delivery, so shipyard manufactured nuclear power plants that could be deployed to site as completed units.
Yeah, thank you for your loaded question. So I'll break it up into two segments. I'll start with harmonization. From going from the first of a kind to deployment of the SMRs or Gen 4 nuclear reactors is key with respect to not always treat every project as a first of a kind project. So the transportability of the technical information that is being used by the regulatory body to render a decision is transportable as equally as transportable of a nuclear technology. Well, what does this mean? Means that the information in support of the ability of to have a safe production of nuclear, and it's key for all of the designers and the operators. The regulator will not be responsible for the production of your energy, but don't make yourself to be a producer of a reactor that only what I call a vapor reactor or a research reactor that is permanently. So all this to say harmonization is key for the deployment. And with respect to the floating and transportability of reactor, John touched on it a little bit. Let's not reinvent the wheel. We have a lot of experience from the military application on building, let's call them SMRs. Let's leave the military element of it. They have been building floating reactors. They have been building ship that are generated being propulsion by nuclear, and that is applicable for a barge. And of course, Joe mentioned the 3 S's has to be inherent in the design, but if we always go by the first of a kind for every project, the deployment and the beneficial use of nuclear for the world is not going to happen.
Thank you very much. Yes, I believe there are more reactors in the sea than there are on land. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Mr. Orzat, EDF has very substantial, successful new build program already, of course, underway in Europe and China. And I would love to hear from you how EDF will be integrating your experience and learnings from that large-scale, gigawatt-scale delivery of nuclear power plants to your SMR program. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Kirsty, and it's a great pleasure and honor to be there, Mr. DG Grossi, and thank you for this event, and thank you to the organizer of this wonderful event. Well, as you said, it is true. At the beginning, the experience of EDF is in large reactor. We had this experience of creating, in fact, the first French fleet, large reactor, and work with our Chinese colleagues and in the UK, in South Africa, in many countries in the world on large reactors. And still, we think that there is a great role to play with large reactors in a world that desperately needs dispatchable, low-carbon electricity. We need to keep it in mind. At the same time, we really think there is a fascinating story to write down with SMR. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe the DNA of EDF in nuclear is to scale up or helping scaling up nuclear. The first French fleet, it's 58 reactors. 54 of them were commissioned in 15 years. At this time, 50 million inhabitant country, this is quite a scale effect, I would say. And in fact, this is the heart of EDF in nuclear, to scale up nuclear. We really think that there is something very special with SMR. We need to address now more flexible needs, and SMR obviously may be an answer. We have a very strong market pool. It has been said with the GAFAM, but also with the chemistry, many industry sectors. They are desperately seeking for low-carbon electricity. So in complement with a large-scale reactor, we need SMR. We also need to accelerate the decarbonization. We are not on the target at the time. I may fear we are losing the war against climate change. We need to accelerate desperately and accelerate. And a good SMR could be a way to decarbonize a fossil site. Use the river, use the sea, use the grid, we see it already there, and change a site which is a strong emission of CO2 into a low-carbon electricity site. Putting SMR in the right place on the grid could be also a way to avoid grid modifications, which are quite difficult in many of the time. We can use also SMR to bring low-carbon electricity and steam to industrial platforms. So for all those needs, in fact, EDF is considering SMR as fully part of its strategy. We have the ambition, to market a third-generation SMR in the years to come. It is designed to be 300 megawatt size. This is the first goal is to decarbonize fossil sites, but at the same time to bring electricity to new industrial platform and so on. So it is fully integrated in our strategy, and our first priority, our first motivation is with our colleagues to scale up the story of SMR and to speed up the story of SMR.
Thank you. 54 reactors in 15 years, ladies and gentlemen. You know,
a quite small country, if I dare say.
Extraordinary.
We are not China. So this is a great story.
It is. And France, of course, is, you know, a very unusual, modern, industrialized economy to already have a fully clean electricity grid, thanks to the combination of nuclear and renewables, but largely nuclear. But there are, you know, we also need to decarbonize the rest of our economy, as you're rightly pointing to. So tell me a bit more about how EDF intends to really operationalize this opportunity.
If we are looking at the differences between the way we can scale up and industrial large-scale reactor and SMR, there are many differences. You know, in large-scale reactor, most of the time, the way you are going forward is, okay, I design it, I build a first of a kind, and then I repeat it. This is quite simple. On SMR, it's the wrong way to do it, because obviously you need to design. At the part of time, you will need a first of a kind. But if you do not think about the operation, the supply chain, the modularization, the standardization, the regulation from the beginning, you will be in the wrong way. So our approach is to design a reactor which has the just needed options from the customers, because we need to do it simple. That's true, DG Grossi. You're perfectly true. Nuclear has to become simple in a certain way. But at the same time, we have to think about the series effect, because obviously, if you are doing SMR to build one or two in certain places, it will be quite expensive. So the question is, how do we target the series effect? Yes. The first thing, standardization, modularization. Second thing, the regulation. It has been said, we have many options on the table. You know, at EDF, we had the opportunity and the honor to see the cooperation between 6 European safety authorities, the Netherlands, Poland, Czech Republic, Finland, Sweden, and France, which are at the same time considering new world. They are not thinking about what could be the reference, what could be the paper, what was my dream. No, they look at the reactor and they say, that, I love it, I don't like that, you need to change that, and so on. So at the end of the day, we need to see this reactor licensed by 6 countries, exactly the same reactor. This is very important. Secondly, the supply chain. We won't succeed in SMR if we have a supply chain for each model. It won't work. It may work with Iaea, Wallon, VVER, and so on, but it will not work with SMR. So we need supply chain with standardized options, with modularizations, with standardized equipment that is able to work for many vendors and able to develop a new approach for nuclear. We need to think to the operation. Operation is very often lost in the discussion with SMR, but at the end of the day, you know, for large-scale reactor, the operator is quite obvious. It is a utility. But with SMR, we will see new customers. Not only utility, maybe big industrial country, big cities, I don't know. Those guys, do they want to become operators? How will they become operator? So we are considering the fact that maybe EDF with other actors may help on this reflection about the operation and the way we can have good standards in operation and partnerships between operators that are able to foster the story of SMR in a good way. Last thing, but not the least important, the financing. It has been said, we need to see the international institution financing nuclear, and probably beginning with SMR is a good way to start with. So we are also at their disposal to explain how we can organize business models that are efficient for SMR. So that's how we see our role. And our role is an appeal to an international cooperation on SMR between regulators, vendors, customers, supply chain, unless we won't see this fantastic story happen.
Well, this is wonderful. We really must leverage the deep experience and capabilities that you have inside your company. So standardization, diverse competitive supply chains, regulatory harmonization, new operating models, and financeability. These are fundamental conditions. Thank you very much. Mr. Zhu, China, of course, also has really an extraordinary track record in fleet deployments of of nuclear energy and a very large new build program planned as well. Tell us about how you can leverage that experience in programmatic delivery to ensure the successful scale-up and deployments of SMRs to support your energy needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Will speak in Chinese, so please use your.
The SMR is limited to its scale effect, so its unit cost per megawatt is higher compared with the large reactor. But the advantage is also obvious. That is, first, the construction duration is short and the total cost is low. So investment has lower risk compared with the large reactor. Second, because it's fleet deployment and the equipment is required less during operation. So we could realize the standard manufacturing of the SMR equipment. It could lower the operation cost. Second, the request for the siting is flexible. Because the emergency response area is lower and the request is more flexible, so SMR could be deployed closer to the demand requests. For example, the high-temperature reactor, it could couple with the petrochemistry. In China, we built near the Jiangsu province, the Xue project. We built the HTR PM600 and HPI 1000. We used the high-temperature reactor to provide the high-temperature and high-pressure steam to the industrial park. It could reduce the carbon consumption during the fossil production. The construction duration for a high-temperature reactor is 40 months. It's significantly shorter than the large reactor's 60 months duration. Apart from the Xue project in China, we also have the Liaoning province and Guangdong province that are planning the coupling of high-temperature reactor and the petrochemical. The other country, maybe some other countries are also interested in this. Another example is the low-temperature heating by the SMR. Heating is quite demanded in North China in winter. Now we have designed the pool reactor. The safety is inherent, but because it operates only half per year, so the economic effect stays improved. In the future, we plan to take approaches like automatic operation, central control, and integrated model like sending it back to the vendor for refueling and maintenance. This will allow no radioactive substance on the site, and it will lower the requirement for the site. It will be more acceptable for the public. And of course, it requires to solve some safety standards in the issues of transportation. And this is why the Nancy's work that the IAEA has this morning is very important for setting up such a standard. It's crucial for the safety and design and operation of the SMR.
Excellent, thank you. I'm so glad that you told us about the initiative to use SMRs for the direct supply of heat, because of course nuclear energy can produce not just power but also heat, which is very important for industrial decarbonization. Can you tell us about your plans after the first-of-a-kind ACP 100 that you're currently building, how CNNP is planning to deploy and scale up SMR technology to support decarbonization of industrial facilities and coal plants?
Well, for CNNC, currently we have 25 units under operation. Last year, 18 of the 25 units have achieved the full 1.0 performance indicator score. We have 18 units under construction or approved. All of them are under progress. This year, the Unit 1 of Zhangzhou Energy Company is planned to put into grid connection, and next year there will be another one. For the units constructed in recent years, all these units are constructed within the 60 months construction duration, and all of them are constructed within the budget. According to the dual carbon policy in China, in current phase, large reactor is our major force because in China, electricity demand is huge and the grid structure is huge as well. Large reactor could realize the efficient application of every site. Apart from the nuclear power, CNNC also has other energy options like the wind, solar, and hydro, and power storage. According to the grid structures in different areas, as well as their energy resources, we could design integrated energy solution and thus to establish the dual carbon goals. In China, we have 100 megawatts level reactors, 65 megawatts reactors, and 10 megawatts SMRs, and 100 megawatts SMRs. According to the demands, we will select the appropriate site for construction. SMR has several advantages in this area. For example, the ACP 100, it could realize the heating and power supply in remote areas and the islands. Another is the coupling with the petrochemical for the HTR. This is a hot topic recently. And also the low temperature heating could replace the traditional fossil resources to realize the heating in the North China in winter. Thank you.
That's very visionary. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for your remarks. Now it's your turn. I will turn to the audience now and invite some questions. But maybe before I do, I will invite DG Grossi. Since we started with you, I would love to hear if you have some reflections on the discussion so far, and then I will take some questions from the floor. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think when one hears and listens to the different perspectives from different angles, countries, and professional approaches, mine or the regulator of the private company or the big national utility or like in China. One is, in general, I would say very encouraged because my impression is that we are seeing the same issues. And this is, as they say, recognizing the problem is half the solution. We should be perhaps in a better place than that, but at least I believe that there is a commonality of views. There is no opposing approach, for example, from the regulatory family as to what needs to be done. Still, there are important questions that we need to answer. And also the fact that here you have two apparently opposing ideas that we must recognize. In general, in energy, there is no one-size-fits-all. To a certain extent, SMR challenges that idea, because without going for one SMR, we are going to see cases where, from a regulatory perspective and from an industry perspective, we will want one design to be applicable to a number of markets, not all the markets, not all the places, but this is where we are going to be moving into. And this is perhaps a rhetorical paradox. In reality, it shouldn't be as complicated. And this is why we need to work into this regulatory convergence, not regulatory unanimity, but regulatory convergence, and of course, operational standardization as well, industrial standardization, so that nuclear can give what other industries have done so efficiently. There is nothing intrinsic in nuclear that makes it impossible in the sense of, applying or using certain pieces of equipment in an undistinguishable way, I would say.
Very good, thank you very much. So strength and diversity plus standardization. So that is indeed the paradox. And absolutely, we can be leveraging learnings from other highly regulated, high performance, complex industrial infrastructure delivery to raise the rates of deployment and scale of deployments of SMRs. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to raise your hand if you have a question. I see one right at the very front and then another hand here. So maybe we could take two questions. If I could ask our dear colleagues with my, oh, you have your own microphone. Yes, wonderful. Please.
Good. Thank you very much.
You.
And thank you for an excellent panel. Chrissy, you always do a great job. Thank you.
So kind.
Thank you. So, gentlemen, financing, at least in the United States, I'm Harsh Hashemian. I'm the incoming president of the American Nuclear Society. And DG Grossi, we are going to welcome you to the United States next month. I look forward to that. So, in the United States, at least, financing is, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems. And now we are hearing about 14 international institutions willing to finance new nuclear. And I have been hearing from the financiers that first of a kind, nuclear is very high risk. So what are the chances that these 14 institutions finally really come out with some real money for deployment? Thank you.
You know, that's a great question. About 3 years ago, Hash, we came to the realization we have very good technologies going through various processes right now through the regulator. We have capacity to execute. You know, we do, I'm talking mostly in the U.S. now. We have, contractors that can build them. The leg of the three-legged stool that was missing was financing. So I engaged, or my company engaged, starting with JP Morgan 3 years ago to say, because most banks, if not all, they don't necessarily want to finance a nuclear power plant or nuclear reactor. They're all focused on assets under management. So if you have an overarching infrastructure where nuclear is a part of that, so for about 2 years, we worked with the top 5 banks in the U.S., and we made tremendous progress because a lot of it had to do with what you said, educating, having them going through the due diligence and understanding. And as I said before, some of these recent announcements that have come out, I think people are awakening to the fact now that investing in new scale or into an advanced reactor with a customer. So you're hearing a lot of, if I looked at the market 3 years ago, coal plant refurbishment, then it became process heat for industrial plants. And today, as we talked about earlier, hyperscalers, this isn't rhetoric for them. They need power now. And so you're hearing more of the notion of power purchase agreements are become more in, as is with renewables. We're starting to see that market turn. And so right now where we announced in January that we've entered into a development agreement with Intra1, which basically goes to the customer and said, if you're a process plant, we will build own or we'll build own transfer commensurate with what your needs are for long-term power purchase agreements. I think you're going to see more of that model. And hopefully we're going to be announcing here something recently along the lines of that model.
Great, thank you. And yes,
And
please.
if I may add, when we look at the global value chain of SMR, you have and large scale will be the same, but the numbers are not the same. You have this design and development phase, the fact that you need to build one or two first of a kind, and then the series. So obviously, with large-scale reactor, the financing of the first of a kind is an immense issue, in fact, because it is billions of dollars or euros and so on, and you have quite a great uncertainty on the cost, the schedule, and so on. It may happen anyway. In SMR, the first of a kind may not cost much more than the design phase. So this is the first difference. And the second difference is that when you look at the global value chain, you have probably as much investment to do in the supply chain than in the models themselves, in the site themselves. You need to help develop the supply chain and get facilities that are modern, state-of-the-art, and able to deliver the modules. Probably it's easier to help investing and financing in the facility. And this is quite a great part of the global value chain that you need to create for an SMR.
Thank you. Mr. Zhu, would you like to add something on cost and schedule certainty?
Yes, I think SMR has simpler requirements for the equipment and for supply chain under current global industry situation, so the risk is lower. If you build a large reactor, you might affected by the external environment, then cannot guarantee the supply chain. This will compromise the safety.
Do you have a microphone?
Okay, can you hear me now, Kirsty?
Yes.
Okay, we'll do it UN style. So, Andrew Patterson with Allied Nuclear Partners. John, we know you well. I wanted to ask a question to go a little deeper than my good friend Hash Hashimian about financing. Since we have to triple nuclear, this cannot be done by only state financing. But if you look at the 54 or 56 projects under construction, Director Grossi, in the IAEA database, more than 80% of the financing is provided by state enterprises, either as a buyer or as a seller. So we have EDF, we have China, obviously we have Rosatom on the panel. In Canada, you have the provincial financing from OPG. John outlined private financing. So the question is, how is this going to evolve as we triple to 2050 and make room to really attract those banks into a risk-driven model that enables the financing that, Kirsty, you highlighted that they're going to evaluate? I commend Director Grossi for convening a set of panels the next 3 days that are going to address this issue.
Thank you very much. So we'll go deeper. Indeed, the end users are very cost and schedule sensitive, and investors want certainty around cost and schedule. DG, would you like to?
I think it's a very pertinent question. Thank you very much. And I think this is why we have designed the conference in the way we have, because we have to be looking and taking the bull by the horns and asking the difficult questions. I think, as I think John was saying, we need them out there. Mm-hmm. And the projections are quite solid into indicating that once we see the model moving, the curves are going to start looking increasingly reasonable in our view. But of course, there is a lot behind this very generic, I'm sorry, and you're absolutely right, this very generic reply to your passing shot. But I think, and it will be interesting to see what is the sense of the House after the conference. But in our estimations, this is what we are seeing.
Thank you very much. Well, we've seen fleet deployments drive down costs in the delivery of nuclear energy, and it's ultimately will be in the fleet deployment that we can achieve more cost reduction in nuclear energy as well. That will be aided, of course, by standardization in the licensing also. Mr. Jamal, would you like to add anything about the role of regulators there?
Yeah, I'll speak about the regulator, but not the financing. It's not our mandate. So, from a regulatory perspective, look, it's very key on a serious note with respect to harmonization and standardization.
Yes.
The fact that the regulatory infrastructure has to be risk-based. If it's not risk-based or adaptable, I can use our collaboration with the US NRC, where we chosen common topics, but I'll tell you it was not easy. When we started to look at how we are evaluating, let it be licensing topical areas or safety control areas at CNSC, DG Grossi always talks about converging. We were converging from the start, but what was the detail associated with it? What does it mean from a topical area? All this to say, it's key that you must have a risk-based regulatory framework. I can speak from Canada. We have before us the licensing, and more than just the licensing, of from 1 megawatt reactors to 10 megawatt reactors to the large reactors. But what we're seeing in Canada, I'm not going to be the pessimistic bad messenger here, is many of the wannabe new designers are fading away on their own. So the finance perspective, I don't think the finance would have saved that technology. They are dying on their own, and let the industry survive based on what is survivability, because you cannot just always infuse money into something that's not going to happen. Publicly in Canada, if you wait around for 3 more weeks, you're going to hear us about these 2 designers that we as a regulator were not spending any resources against them, because they can't even pay the regulatory fees.
Thank you. Oh, Mr. Zhu?
Our world doesn't actually lack of money. As long as the nuclear power plant could be operated in a safe and orderly order, so the investment would not be an issue. In China, we provide the examples that if the nuclear power plant could be constructed with a reasonable cost and with excellent performance, and they will come up with economic benefit. So I think that's very important to lower the cost.
Absolutely. Really, we're in the de-risking phase. We're in the demonstration, the commercialization phase, de-risking the regulatory, the licensing piece, the operating piece, the supply chain risk, the construction risk. But once these risks are retired, then how do we scale? John?
From a de-risking, you know, NuScale, we've been fortunate. We have $1.8 billion invested. A lot of that money, when we went to the NRC, went to the scaling up and evaluation and testing. As an example, our helical coil steam generators, and we tested them and built them in Via Vicenza, Italy at CIET Labs. So they've been scaled and tested, but it's cost a lot of money to do that. I believe going forward, to your point, what's important to the supply chain too is the sustainability of supply. You know, it's not building one-off plants over so many years. It's getting that, as you said, fleet moving forward. As the gentleman said, you know, private financing versus public, it's not one or the other. It's private-public partnerships. You know, there's no innovative anything that I can think of never started with state funding. We're very fortunate. I started off my career with the Obama administration when we won the first competitive award in the FOA, and subsequently keeps going. And fortunately in our country, both the Democrats and the Republicans are very pro-advanced nuclear.
Very good. Well, we started this session describing how this is just the beginning. So let's think about what some of the biggest challenges may be ahead of us in terms of really achieving the scale of demand. But I do see a question. Yes, please.
Hello, Stefan Campena from Nucleo. Just a question. There's an American study saying, it's Blue Energy, saying that the nuclear reactor accounts for only 7% of a nuclear power plant's cost. So my question is that value correct, first, to China, France, and US? And the second, what's the model then about SMRs in that framework, unless you've got some advantages with the fuel or other assets? Thank you.
My guess is that the fraction will depend on where you're building it and the overall cost. I expect that will vary. Mr. Ozat, would you like to respond? And then I'll come to you, Mr. Zhu.
It seems to be a little quite low, this figure, 7%. Obviously, it depends on many factors, the lifespan, the cost of money during construction, which is a key factor, the efficiency of the design. I can make the calculation if you want, but I would say it at least 2 or 3 times that in the reality.
I think the financing costs will vary, the construction costs will vary. Mr. Zhu?
Sorry, I cannot follow the question.
The question is, what fraction of the cost of delivering a nuclear plant is the nuclear island, is the nuclear equipment, and how much of the cost is associated with the cost of construction and the civil works and the financing, for example?
Well, for our nuclear power plants built in the island, such as the Hainan province, it is a fact that building an island plant is higher than building in land. For example, the Zhejiang province, which I worked in, the cost in the workforces are higher because it's not that convenient. For current practice, the economic benefit remains the gap for the island plants compared with the land plants.
Well, we did have one mention of fuel now, so I think that would be interesting to take the panel's perspective on the importance of supply and cost of fuel, also to enable scale. But I see a gentleman here holding his magazine, and he's waiting for a microphone, and then I'll come to you. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, and hello everybody, and thanks for your thanks for your time here. And I would like to ask a couple of questions. I will ask Mr. John Hopkins. I know that NuScale is at the most advanced stage among other reactors in the US. Yet, a couple of days ago, we heard that Google and Amazon signed with other companies. Can I know what's your comment on it? Because if there is an embarking country would like to decide on a nuclear reactor, SMR, obviously NuScale would be #1 choice. So what happened right there? And for Mr. Jalal Ramzi, from a regulatory point of view, the emergency zone of SMR, has it been yet decided? Is it the factory itself, or it's like the large reactors? And thank you.
Thank you.
No, I mentioned earlier, having that announcement a week ago or 2 weeks ago for the industry, it's been a good thing, and it's been a good thing for us. We're in conversations with those same companies. You know, it depends on what's your timing and when do you need the energy. As I said, the hyperscalers typically saying they need it now. What made them to decide to go forward with these advanced reactors? They know, I don't know. But I'm not saying that they're not necessarily going to come to us as well. So we're working with some of these similar companies, and we're hopeful we'll have an announcement here. And what my announcement wants to be is we're looking to build a plant. We're going to have an agreement with long-term PPAs to build a plant, you know, within this decade.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Sounds like a commission hearing. The fact that the emergency primary zone determination, and I want to go back to the fact of the harmonization. We are reviewing a same design between the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission regulator and USNRC. USNRC, as an example of converging, we're ahead of us with respect to determination of the EPZ or EPZ. So we did adopt the process. We're adopting the requirements and then putting together it's the PSA or probabilistic safety assessment and the PRA taking that into account. All this to say it's already been done. And from a regulatory perspective, that's the agility we're demonstrating. But we go back to the key point here, determination, not of always first of a kind, but how do you adopt information that does exist from other mature regulators?
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir. And then I have one more here, and I'll come back to you, please.
Thank you. Said Moulin from Morocco. I just wonder how SMRs can be developed through PPPs, public-private partnership, where private companies can just sell electricity for 30, 40, or 50 years. The second point I would like to say, how they can attract green financing. It is a key today also. We're talking about decarbonization of the economy, and there is huge opportunity with SMR. How this green financing that we are looking everywhere, how they can also play a role for SMR development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sounds like an EU taxonomy question, sustainable finance.
Yes, I think that the SMRs are fully included in the EU taxonomy, which is a good way to authorize financing which are sensitive, I would say, to green approaches. My feeling also is that should big world institutions such as the World Bank, the BERD and so on be okay, and it seems to be on the good track, but I will be quite prudent on that, but should they be okay to finance even a small part of those kind of projects, it would have a great effect and a great lever effect on the fact that private financing should come also. Because if they accept to finance, probably they will ask for a group of experts that would survey the project, a number of dispositions that are very useful for those kinds of institutions could be also very useful and securize private investment. So the question for me is not only green investment, it's the fact that the taxonomy is authorizing some things, and that we need those kind of institutions to come around the table of those SMR to start a new phase for international and private financing.
Something on that thing. I think it's very important, the point. And Xavier, I believe, is also highlighting the fact that there are many things that could be benefiting from from international finance help. Of course, you can imagine a full project, but there are many other things that require in order to get to the point, including traditional nuclear, which I think Xavier was mentioning in the beginning, but because let's not forget that in our own projections and in the projections of the Iaea and others out there, traditional nuclear is going to continue to be the majority of the market, with a very good percentage of SMR. In our high estimate, we put it at 25%. In our low estimate at 6-7%. We certainly hope it's going to be in the higher ground. But for example, in the case of things other than building or financing the whole construction of a nuclear power plant. You have very good examples, for example, in the case of long-term operation and life extension. In the case of my own country, in Argentina, when I used to work for my government, we got financing through the Andean Development Bank, which was a unique experience, which when I told the board of the World Bank that we had benefited from that, they asked me for the information because they didn't know that a regional development bank had successfully extended the life of a Canadian reactor in Argentina, which was paid back and everything, worked, very, very, very nicely. So I believe that this is also an area, feasibility studies, long-term operation, segments of projects could be helped in this way, thus giving the prompt for private capital to join in when they see that there is this label of confidence. Because we should never forget that you are coming from the incredible, and I say it again, incredible fact that in some banks you have a ban, you have a prohibition. They say whatever you want to finance is possible, but nuclear, no, don't get into that. So this absurdity is something that we need to overcome. And we are well on the way to do that. But as you know, unfortunately, and institutions and bureaucracies are what they are, long habits die hard. And people are used to, when they say nuclear, they don't even look at it in these big financing institutions. So this is the effort. It will take some time, but I think that if we do it together, and if they get the same message from China to the Antarctica and from the small modular reactor community to the big companies saying it's okay, the taxonomy example is a fantastic example where we see that, and it wasn't easy, you know it as well. It wasn't easy. Although the science is there, it was a very uphill battle. But I think the story is a good story, and it's moving in the right direction. So thank you for the excellent question.
Thank you very much. Well, I think with those inspiring remarks, I'm afraid we will now give DG Grossi the last word in this panel, but it's been really wonderful to launch the discussion that I know will be ongoing and continue to be extremely interesting and stimulating throughout the rest of this conference. I'm sorry I couldn't take all of your questions, but as I said, this conference is just at the start. So thank you very, very much. Please join me in thanking our very distinguished panel.
Thank you. As Kirsty said, thank you to all of our distinguished panelists and the moderator. Kirsty, thank you for the discussion and the insights that it provided. And you may now all return to your seats. Thank you. Okay. We will now hear a pre-recorded message from Mr. Alexei Lichakov, the CEO of Rosatom, which will be followed by some important administrative remarks about this conference. Thanks.
Уважаемый председатель конференции, уважаемый генеральный директор, уважаемые коллеги. Мы признательны МАГАТЭ за организацию первой международной конференции по малым модульным реакторам. Росатом выступил одним из ее инициаторов, и я считаю, что актуальность конференции трудно переоценить. У малых атомных станций есть ряд преимуществ, которые обусловили растущий интерес к ним в последние годы. По сравнению с АЭС большой мощности, они наиболее компактны. Это упрощает процесс выбора площадки, снижает капитальные и эксплуатационные затраты и, конечно, сокращает сроки строительства. Все это делает малые модульные атомные электростанции действительно незаменимыми для энергоснабжения отдаленных регионов, островных государств или отдельных промышленных проектов. А для мирового атомного сообщества это означает повышение доступности атомной энергии и существенное расширение клуба ее пользователей. Уважаемые коллеги, Россия на сегодняшний день дальше других игроков мирового атомного рынка продвинулась в разработке малых модульных реакторов. У нас богатейшая история создания и эксплуатации таких проектов. 70 лет назад в Советском Союзе была построена первая в мире атомная электростанция. Это был энергоблок малой мощности 5 мегаватт. 50 лет на Чукотке уже работает энергоблоки Билибинской атомной электростанции мощностью 12 мегаватт каждый. Самое масштабное применение реакторы малой мощности нашли в атомном ледокольном флоте. С момента спуска на воду первого атомного ледокола «Ленин» прошло 65 лет. С тех пор мы запустили в эксплуатацию еще 11 атомоходов и атомный лихтеровоз. Сейчас строим и эксплуатируем атомные ледоколы нового поколения, оставаясь единственной страной, обладающей атомным ледокольным флотом. Уважаемые коллеги, опыт судовых реакторов был использован для создания современных проектов малых модульных атомных электростанций не на бумаге, не в планах, а в реальном воплощении. Так, в 2020 году Росатом запустил первую в мире плавучую атомную электростанцию малой мощности «Академик Ломоносов» с 2 реакторами общей электрической мощностью 77 мегаватт. Развивая уже наработанный опыт, строим сейчас флотилию из 4 модернизированных плавучих атомных энергоблоков электрической мощностью 106 мегаватт каждый с реакторами Ритм-200С. Они будут снабжать энергией горнорудные предприятия на Чукотке. Видим востребованность наших решений в других странах. Для зарубежного рынка в этом году завершаем проектирование плавучего энергоблока с 2 реакторами серии Ритм-200М с совокупной электрической мощностью до 100 мегаватт. Предлагаем партнерам бизнес-модель атомной батарейки. Это значит, что заказчик покупает у нас только электроэнергию. Владельцем и оператором плавучих энергоблоков будет госкорпорация «Росатом». Также мы обеспечиваем замену блоков на время перезагрузки топлива и техническое обслуживание. Такая схема требует от заказчика существенно меньших вложений в развитие ядерной инфраструктуры. Мы считаем, что в части международного регулирования плавучих АСММ очень важно углубление сотрудничества между МАГАТЭ и Международной морской организацией. Параллельно продолжаем развивать наземную малую энергетику. Реализуем проект малой атомной станции с реакторами «Ритм» еще в одном отдаленном российском регионе, в Якутии. Станция будет поставлять электроэнергию для добывающих предприятий. В мае национальный регулятор одобрил материалы об основании лицензии на сооружение первого энергоблока якутской АСММ. Мы уже ведем работу по сооружению объектов внешней инфраструктуры, сотрудничаем с заинтересованными странами. И в этом году заключили с Республикой Узбекистан первый в мире экспортный контракт на строительство современной атомной станции малой мощности. Он предусматривает сооружение малой АЭС с 6 реакторными установками «Ритм». Параллельно развиваем линейку микрореакторов. К 2030 году введем в эксплуатацию реактор типа «Шельф-М» мощностью до 10 мегаватт. По сути, это капсула, которую можно доставить в нужное место и подключить к локальной сети. И для этого проекта у нас уже есть промышленный заказчик. Уважаемые коллеги, дамы и господа, в заключение отдельно остановлюсь на системной работе МАГАТЭ по продвижению малой атомной энергетики, в том числе через общеагентскую платформу по реакторам малой мощности. Росатом активно участвует в этой деятельности агентства. Мы делимся нашими знаниями, нашими компетенциями, вносим свой вклад в разработку технических документов МАГАТЭ в этой сфере. Мы приветствуем инициативу гендиректора агентства о проведении серии тематических школ МАГАТЭ под эгидой платформы по реакторам малой мощности. Одну из таких школ, ориентированную на плавучий АЭС и на морской транспорт, мы готовы провести в 2026 году в России. Продолжаем работать в рамках межрегионального проекта Агентства по техническому сотрудничеству в области малой атомной энергетики. Организовали в России за последние годы целый ряд учебных курсов для специалистов из стран-членов МАГАТЭ. На полях этой конференции будет подписано соглашение о присвоении Технической академии Росатома статуса Центра сотрудничества МАГАТЭ по тематике малых модульных реакторов. Работаем по линии проекта ИНПРО. В прошлом году провели в Санкт-Петербурге форум-диалог по реакторам малой мощности. Уважаемый председатель конференции, уважаемый генеральный директор МАГАТЭ, изменение климата приводит к тому, что все больше стран рассматривают ядерную энергетику как решение проблемы энергетической безопасности. Многие останавливают свой выбор на атомных станциях малой мощности. Уверен, что эта тематическая конференция МАГАТЭ станет важной вехой в нашей общей работе по продвижению и внедрению малой атомной энергетики. От души желаю всем участникам плодотворной работы. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you to Rosatom for sending that message. I would now like to introduce Ms. Aline Desclaiseaux. She is the Director of the Division of Nuclear Power here at the agency and the co-scientific secretary for this conference.
Yes, dear colleagues. Yes, once again, let me welcome you to this international conference on small modular reactors and their applications. And we are delighted to have you here with us today. And before we dive into the exciting agenda we have planned, I would like to take a few moments to go over some important administrative details to ensure that our conference runs smoothly. So, let me start with safety first. In the unlikely event of an emergency, an alarm will be sounded and announcement will be made with further instructions on how to proceed. If you are asked to evacuate a meeting room, please proceed calmly to the nearest marked exit and follow the further instruction of our staff. Should you notice any suspicious activity taking place, this should be reported to a member of our staff or to the nearest member of the VIC security staff as soon as possible. Code of conduct. So we are committed to creating a respectful and inclusive environment for everyone. Please take a moment to review our code of conduct, which is also available on our conference website. Conference program now. So if not yet done, please take a moment to familiarize yourself with the conference program, which outlines the schedule of sessions, panels, poster sessions, and side events. You can find the detailed program on the conference website or on our conference application. Now, conference activities. So, as you can see, we have planned a very rich program that we will keep you very busy during the week. So please note that all sessions are being live streamed and recorded for your colleagues who could not join. A recording of the live stream broadcast for all rooms will be available in the conference application after the conference is concluded. Discussion with participants form an important part of the conference, and so we encourage all participants to submit relevant topical questions for each session through the Iaea conference and meetings app. This can be done prior to or also during the sessions. And anyone attending physically in the room who wishes to take the floor should have, after having been recognized by your chairperson, begin their question or comments by stating their name, country, and/or organization. And for those attending in person, you can ask your question from your seat using the microphone in front of you. So what about the program? So in this program, there are 5 topical plenary discussions. They are shown in green on the program here. And the first one will be just after the break today, and the other will happen in the morning. We have planned 44 parallel technical sessions, starting from tomorrow morning. They are shown in orange in the program there. 6 poster sessions and 5 side events at lunchtime or in the evening, as shown in yellow. Well, these are the statistics from Friday. So on Friday, we had more than 1,200 registered participants. And yes, the room here is full. Coming from 95 member states and 17 international organizations or NGOs. We also have more than 300 papers accepted. And you can see on the statistics that while gender balance is not reached, the age distribution shows an interest in all classes of age. Almost half of participants are under 40 years old. So please don't hesitate to engage conversation with participants from all over the world and with different expertise in the various occasions that you will have. If we look at the floor plans, yes, we are now in this room at the first floor, and not all, but parallel sessions will be taking place throughout the conference, and we are in what is shown here as conference room BRBM1. So participants are informed that the room and this room will host parallel session together with conference room M2 and M3, which are on this side of the room. Poster sessions will happen also on this floor, more on this side, and they will be set up tomorrow morning in the designated poster area, and they will be displayed for one day only. And we kindly ask all poster presenters to set up their poster on the assigned boards in the morning and to remove them by the evening of the same day. Additionally, posters released for digital publication are available to view virtually on the application, and you may leave comments or questions to the authors at any time using the comment function under each individual poster. We will also use the ground floor. Next slide, please. Yes. Can you switch next slide? Yes. So we also will use part of the ground floor of the M building, and we will have parallel sessions also in room M7, as shown on the plan, and MOE 100. And details of the room assignment, you can find it in the conference program. Complimentary refreshments will be served each morning and each afternoon, and a welcome reception will take place today at 6 o'clock after the last side event. The coffee breaks will take place in the coffee area outside of this room and on the ground floor, and the receptions are held on the ground floor of the building. So if I go a little bit further into the event that we have planned. So here on this slide, you have the 5 plenary sessions that will take place all in this room. We will start with the end-user plenary session after the break today. And you can see the different topics that will be discussed every morning of the conference, of this conference. It's open to everyone, and as I said here. If we go also into the detail of side events, so we have prepared a series of exciting side events in cooperation with our partners. They can be found on the conference program, all details. And it will start at lunchtime tomorrow with an event on how women can be game changer for SMRs. It will discuss gendered public acceptance and how SMRs are opportunity for women. It's open to all, with possibility to register for lunch bags, and there is a link on the website, so don't hesitate to register for it. Then, tomorrow evening, an important also side event, which is called Industry Night, and we have 21 representatives from SMR developers who will present their programs and visions. So it starts tomorrow at 5:45 on the ground floor with a reception, and we will explain how it works, but you can see already how it has been allocated in 2 different rooms that are close to us. Also, on Wednesday lunchtime, we will have a side event about IAEA activities on SMRs. So if you want to learn all the support that we provide, please join this side event. Additionally, on Wednesday evening, I want to highlight the Young Generation event called Towards a Sustainable and Equitable Future, with also a reception which is planned. And last but not least, on Thursday lunchtime, we have a side event prepared by the SMR Reactors Forum, celebrating a decade of shaping the future of nuclear safety. Now, a word on exhibitions. So please take time to visit our exhibitors. They are located on this floor, close to the M plenary, and also on the ground floor of this building and in Building A. And I would like here to thank the exhibitors and sponsors who have financially contributed to the SMR conference for their generous support, which helped us welcome all of you under good conditions. Another word regarding financial support to some participants. So the participants who have received financial support for their attendance to the conference are kindly requested to register at Conference Services Information Desk on the ground floor, close to the main entrance of this building. So in any case, our colleagues will be happy to assist you at the Conference Services Information Desk should you have any question. So, to end my administrative remarks, I must say that we are very excited to get started and look forward to a productive and inspiring conference. And now I invite you all for a break, and please, I invite you also to come back to this room at 4:45 sharp, please, to discuss with energy end users how SMRs could help them decarbonize the industry. Thank you very much for your attention.
Devil's cup slowly is taking over me. Too high, I can't come down. Losing my head, spinning round and round. Can you feel me now? With a taste of your lips, I'm on a ride. You're toxic, I'm slipping under. Taste of a poison paradigm. I'm addicted to you. something I had just about script through. Why do you think I let you get away with the things you said to me? Could it be I like you? It's so shameful of me. I like you. No one I ever knew or have spoken to resembles you. This is good or bad, all depending on my general mood. Why do you think I let you get away with all the things you said to me? Could it be I like you? It's so shameful of me. I like you. And magistrates bend their lives, hiding their mistakes. They look at you and I, and envy makes them cry. Envy makes them cry. Forces of command, they show their fat faces into mine. You and I just smile because we're thinking the same line. Why do you think I let you get away with all the things you said to me? Could it be I like you? It's so shameful of me. I like you. You're not right in the head, and nor my eye. This is why. You're not right in the head, and nor my mind. This is why. This is why I like you. I like you. I like you. This is why I like you. I like you. I like you. Because you're not right in the head, and nor am I. And this is why. You're not right in the head, and nor am I. And this is why. This is why I like you. I like you. I like you. This is why I like you. Say what you want. Don't play games with my affection. Take what you need. Don't leave me with no direction. All alone, I sit on by the phone, waiting for you, baby. Through the years, how can you stand to hear my pleading for you, dear? You know I'm crying. Ooh. Go
together with the miles apart inside. Was it something I said or something I did? Did my words don't come out right? Though I try not to hurt you, though I try, but I guess that's what they say. Every rose has its thorn, just like every night has its dawn, just like every cowboy sings his sad, sad song. Every rose has its thorn. I listen to a favorite song playing on the radio. Hear the DJ say he loves a game of easy come and easy go. But I wonder, does he know? Has he ever felt like this? And I know that you'll be here right now if I can let you know. Somehow, I guess every rose has its thorn, just like every night has its dawn, just like every cowboy sings his sad, sad song. Every rose has its thorn. Though it's been a while now, I can still feel so much pain. Like a knife that cuts you, the wound heals, but the scar remains. Yeah, yeah. I know I could have saved your love that night if I'd known just what to say. Instead of making love, we both made our separate ways. And now I hear you find somebody new, and that I never meant that much to you. To hear that tears me deep inside, and to see you cuts me like a knife. I guess every rose has its thorn, just like every night has its dawn. Every cowboy sings his sad, sad song. Every rose has its thorn. Every rose has its thorn, just like every night has its dawn, just like every cowboy sings his sad.
Executive, the United Nations.
Only to be told I can see and breathe. No more will it be, and nothing's gonna change the way we live. 'Cause we can always take but never give, and other things are changing for the worse. See, ooh, it's a crazy world, and I just can't see that.
Thank you, Arlene, and thank you to IAEA for hosting this event and for the invitation. It's fantastic to be here and delighted to chair the discussion on the application of nuclear energy, in particular small modular reactors to hard-to-abate energy-intensive sectors. We are living in an exciting time. It was mentioned earlier that we're seeing increasing global policy support for nuclear energy, and there's huge interest from a wide range of stakeholders in nuclear industry and in nuclear technology, in particular advanced nuclear technology like small modular reactors. So this significant level of interest is demonstrated with over, I believe, 1,200 registrants to this IAEA International Conference on SMR. We heard before from Director General Grossi of the momentum to support the deployment of nuclear energy to meet the global demand for clean energy needs and address climate change, and this is accelerating. Last December, we heard at the United Nations COP28 in Dubai, the first global stocktake, we saw 198 signatory countries to UN framework call for the accelerating deployment of low-emission energy technology, including nuclear power for deep and rapid decarbonization, particularly in the hard-to-abate sectors, such as industry. Accelerating nuclear energy has been recognized as a means to accelerate deep, rapid, sustainable reduction in greenhouse gas emission. This represents the first time nuclear energy has been formally specified as one of the solutions in climate change in the COP agreement. Also, we heard at COP28, a major moment was the ministerial pledge by 25 countries to work together, tripling global nuclear power capacity by 2050 to reach net zero. In addition to the nuclear sector, in September at the New York Climate Week, as part of Net Zero Nuclear Initiative, 42 exajoule, mainly led by emerging and developing economies. However, global energy-related CO2 emission grew by 1.1% in 2023 to a record new high of 37.4 billion tons. Last year. Energy intensive industry such as steelmaking, chemical production, and data center are the backbone of our modern economy. These industries require vast amount of energy to operate, and their energy consumption is only expected to rise, and with technological advancement and increasing global demand. However, fossil fuel is still the primary energy source for these sectors, leading to major contribution to greenhouse gas emission. From these energy situation and demand for clean energy, we are facing increasing need, plan to deploy nuclear energy, such as data centers we already heard earlier in the conference. IAEA estimated that The electricity consumption from data center, artificial intelligence, and crypto sector could double by 2026 compared to 2022. The significant source of the growth of electricity demand from data center contributed to the announcement by US tech hyperscalers such as Amazon, Google, and Microsoft recently in their investment in nuclear energy. These tech sectors recognize it important as a source of abundant 24/7 clean electricity. With the great news that US Constellation Energy plans to restart Unit 1 of 3 Mile Island to provide clean power, reversing the previous US trend to premature closure of well-performing nuclear power plant. Also, Google announcement of corporate agreement to purchase nuclear energy from Kairos Power SMR. In addition to growth in the electricity demand, energy consumption from energy incentive sector continue rising from industry subsector like steel, chemical, cement, and aluminium. The industrial sector accounts for 37% of the global energy use in 2022. However, fossil fuel remained the dominant source for these sectors, with many industrial processes involve chemical reaction and require high temperature heat. Nuclear energy offers a unique energy source by providing clean heat and electricity to help to decarbonize the industrial sector. There are many examples of development around the world looking to deploy nuclear energy for industrial application. We will hear in the panel, Olin Synthos Green Energy is working with GE Hitachi to deploy a fleet of BWRX 300 SMR in Poland. And part of the project is looking to produce hydrogen from high temperature steam. We're hearing more, no doubt, in this conference about the use of nuclear to generate hydrogen and synthetic fuel. In August this year, China have given approval for the Shuwei nuclear power project to be built by China Nuclear Corporation to provide industrial steam and power for the Yungang petrochemical industrial project. The project will be the world's first nuclear power plant that couple high temperature gas-cooled reactor with pressurized water reactor, combining two Halong 1 gigascale PWR with a high temperature reactor to provide process heat and power to this industrial complex. In US, Dow and X-Energy is collaborating to provide high temperature reactors to provide process heat and power to one of Dow's US coast facilities. Mining is another sector that's increasing to look to use nuclear, particularly microreactors, to meet their high energy needs and to overcome the challenge of remote location. We will hear about the transport sector bringing particular decarbonizing challenges. Their challenge including shipping and aviation require independent, reliable, high energy density power source. We'll hear from the panel shortly from experts in the use of nuclear energy for these sectors. However, the use of nuclear for marine propulsion in particular will require further development of new regulations and application guidance. These nuclear applications for different industrial sectors that I briefly mentioned are just some in the pipeline, with many more examples planned around the globe. Therefore, look forward to the panel discussion we have today, exploring the opportunity for nuclear across these wide range of sectors. The session will discuss the use of nuclear energy beyond the gigascale and production, and it will highlight some of the power application in different industrial sectors. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Jeff Donovan from IAEA to moderate the panel expert on the application of nuclear energy for the energy-intensive industrial sectors. Thank you.
Thank you, King. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be your moderator for this panel. My name is Jeff Donovan. I lead communications and outreach for the IAEA Department of Nuclear Energy. And at this moment, I'd just like to welcome all of our panelists onto the stage. Please come and take your seats. You can sit there. So I think King has done an excellent job of teeing this subject up for everybody. I won't belabor the point any further, and we'll get right into the questioning. To start off, I'd like to ask everybody the same question and go around, go straight down the line, starting with Rizwan of the World Steel Association. Basically, amid this global drive for decarbonization and the need for clean and reliable power, how are you as energy-intensive industries thinking about meeting that need, and how is nuclear potentially figuring into your calculations?
I think before we dig into that question, I would just really like to outline the scale of our need, because that will really set the stage for where the nuclear energy can really help us in decarbonization. The world globally consumes roughly 1.8 billion tons of steel. So that's quite a large amount of material usage, and we require quite huge amounts of energy to produce that. So I give you something to outline the scale. For every ton of crude steel, roughly we would require 5.5 megawatt hours of energy. So this is quite a large sum there. And because we currently rely heavily on coal for our energy needs, and we have got tremendous pressure and responsibility to decarbonize ourselves and our reliance on coal. So we are looking for ways to somehow wean ourselves off from that dependence. Very often we hear the Nordic countries, for example, in the EU, that they are the forerunners in decarbonizing, and they are trying to make steel using renewable energy. But there is a certain model that really fits in that geographical context. It is very hard to replicate in the rest of the world. And probably that's where the nuclear energy can fit there. For example, regions which lack those resources, for example, renewables like wind, solar. So there's a huge potential that we see there.
Very good. Rafael?
This what you said was quite interesting, because I think that it provides us to the conclusion that we need to stop magical thinking. We need to stop magical thinking about potential solutions which are not real. Solar, wind will not solve the problems of steel producers, will not solve the problems of heavy industry. So it's why we need nuclear energy. And we need to stop this magical thinking on every level. We need to be brutally honest with ourselves, with our investors, what we can achieve when, what is a supply chain, how real is supply chain, how well developed is technology, and we need to ask ourselves these questions with the brutal honesty to be successful and to be able to deliver clean, stable baseload energy on time and on budget when it's required by our end users. It's what we do in Oil Centers Energy.
And Sarah?
Hey, so I'm here representing aviation, and actually the question, how does it figure in? How does nuclear figure into aviation? Well, the answer is it currently doesn't so much, and that is why I believe I'm here today. So my name is Sarah Wilkin. I'm founder and CEO of Fly Green Alliance, and we are a membership-based organisation working on with a net zero framework. We have been called business model disruptive market makers, demand makers, and we are definitely facilitators and collaborators, as has been asked for today. So we've been really, I think, to kind of go back to why we started, it's because there wasn't the need for sustainable aviation fuel, which is the solution currently for aviation. As I don't know what, well, as you may or may not know, that aviation, of course, flies on hydrocarbons and will do for potentially up to the next 30 plus years. Ryanair placed an order for 350 planes just recently, so that, and an aircraft is in service for around 20 to 30 years. So essentially there is a big need for energy for aviation. So I spoke at the World Nuclear Association in June, and I was on the panel with Google discussing their initiatives, which has now been discussed a lot more recently, and it's becoming a very big a leadership in data centers. So in aviation, we currently don't have so much of this leadership. So our group is really there to start building the supply chain, to putting it into the net zero plans, and it's really to get this conversation, collaboration, and in the end, off-takes there. So we've been part of that. Last week, I was at an event with the Norwegian Armed Forces and Norwegian Airline, and that was a voluntary initiative that was put together, and we have been part of disseminating that work. So we feel it's really important to be at the events, at new events such as SMR events, where SMR developers are really looking for those end takers and off takers, and aviation absolutely will be one of them. We just need to make it. So that's the status of aviation at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, pleasure to be here. My name is Janne Liuko. I'm representing Helen. So Helen is a utility that has been founded and is fully owned by the city of Helsinki, so the capital of Finland. Helen is currently providing heat and electricity to 500,000 customers approximately. Helen has a target now. We will become CO2 neutral by 2030. That's mainly achieved by electrification of the heat production and biomass combustion. But then by 2040, our target is to become also combustion-free altogether. So not only getting rid of the CO2 emissions, but also protecting the biodiversity by becoming combustion-free. That is our target. And for that reason, we have started a nuclear program this summer, which is about we will go forward step by step until reach our target that we will have nuclear energy for our district heating. So now we are currently in the first phase we call preparation phase, where we are, well, first thing there is to set up the business model. We are now evaluating both doing kind of pure heat, only heat with nuclear reactors, or then combining heat and power production. So that is one question that we will be answering here now, and then also discussing with potential co-investors of joining the forces with our project. That's one question. Then we are preparing the bidding and cooperation development with plant vendors, also now already going on, and looking at different sites. Our primary options are our current plant sites where we have now power plants, but we are also looking outside of that now for finding the best, most suitable site for our plant. And of course, looking at the long-term questions as well now, preparing for the operation, taking the long journey, preparing ourselves, our own operating organization, or finding a partner on the operating side. And of course, waste questions are also something that we need to consider at this point. But that's what I'm working with and what we are doing.
Thank you, Janne. Scott Edwards?
Yes, my name's Scott Edwards, and I'm the Director of Regulatory Development for Core Power, and I'm also the chair of a new working group that a new NGO, the Nuclear Energy Maritime Organization, has put together. So the chair of the working group on nuclear security, safety, and safeguards. So, why is the nuclear industry of interest to the maritime sector? Well, as you probably know, 80% of global trade is made through the maritime sector. And it actually accounts for 3% of the world's global emissions of greenhouse gases. So transportation is notoriously fairly difficult to decarbonize. And it's going to be quite the challenge, as I think we already heard from the aviation sector. But there are opportunities to do it. There are approximately 65,000 ships moving around the world, hauling the world's trade. But 7,300 of them account for about 50% of those emissions. So that's definitely a target where there would be an opportunity to provide nuclear power to reduce those emissions from that sector. And as we've heard from some of the earlier speakers today, there is a history of nuclear propulsion in the world. It's typically been used for military applications, although not 100%. So there is an ability to do that. So nuclear power is attractive to be able to do that decarbonization. There also is a lot of talk about, for those ships that you cannot, it might not be economically feasible to make tugboats or some of the smaller vessels nuclear powered. You still are going to use alternative fuels or e-fuels, but you still have to make those fuels themselves. And one of the latest estimates that I've seen is that it's going to take about 20,000 terawatt hours per year of electricity production to make those e-fuels by 2050. So that gives an opportunity for floating nuclear power plants. It could be at the locations where those e-fuels are going to be needed. So those are just some of the potential applications that are out there for nuclear power in the maritime sector.
Very good. Okay. Well, so we have an illustrious panel here. We have the steel industry, we have chemicals, we have aviation, district heating, and maritime applications of nuclear energy. Let's go back to steel. Rizwan, you gave us a sense earlier of the scale of the requirements for high temperature heat and steam in the steel industry. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Give us some more sense of what that really means and how, this is a conference not just about nuclear power, but about SMRs. So I know that perhaps some of your members aren't, necessarily the nuclear, and SMRs are maybe not, they're the first consideration at this point. I don't know, but what is it about SMRs in particular that might meet those needs?
No, thanks. That's a very good question. I'm also equally not familiar with the nuclear energy. We are happy to take any low carbon energy. So I'm here to understand how this universe works. So let me just describe in a nutshell how we make steel. So there are basically two ways of making steel. One is from the primary sources, that is from the iron ore, and the other one is the recycling route, where when steel reaches the end of its life cycle, you collect it and just simply have to melt it. And you get more or less the same type of steel back in circulation. And the second mode is roughly 1/3 of the global production, and that is done primarily using electricity. So that means that the steel that you get from recycling is already 99.9% pure. You just have to melt it, reshape it, and then you have it back. But the steel that we make using the primary sources, that is from the iron ore, it requires almost double the amount of energy. And that is 2/3 of the steel industry's energy needs, and that is the one we are trying to decarbonize. According to the International Energy Agency's projections, these two primary modes of steelmaking are going to change by 2050, and there will be a third mode of steel production which is going to emerge, and that is going to constitute to 20% of the total. And that is using primary sources, that is the iron ore, but through direct reduction and then using electricity, that is using hydrogen. And that requires tremendous amount of energy. So the Nordic countries, the steel companies that you might see in the media, they are the ones who are taking that route. But they are fortunate in a sense there because they have got access to surplus, almost surplus hydroelectric power, which is very reliable. But many other parts of the world, they do not have access to that. So using electricity that you have by wind or by solar have got two inherent complications: the reliability and the predictability. So unless we can solve those problems, we will not be effectively able to utilize the renewable energies. So we want to replicate a reliable source of energy, and that's where the small modular reactors could play a very important role, because we are pressed for time. We have to make that massive shift. The whole society, in fact, has to make the massive shift. And I particularly do not like that label hard-to-abate sectors, because it already is a self-limiting phrase. We underestimate the power of technology, really, because we just have to put together certain set of conditions and having a dialogue between the industries, for example, the energy industry, the end users, to really make that change possible.
Right, very good. I was going to jump over to Finland now, but let me go first to Poland and to Rafael, because it's more connected, I think, to what we're talking about here with the steel industry. Can you give us your view on how your company is looking at using SMRs to decarbonize your operations, to run your factories, your industries, what's behind your thinking there in looking at that particular technology?
So, Orlen Centers Green Energy is a joint venture between largest multi-utility in Central Europe, Orlen, and largest private industrial group. Both companies share chemical plants in Poland, Czech Republic, also refineries in Lithuania, Poland, also Czech Republic, and other places in the Central Europe. So, total Poland consumes 170 terawatt hours of energy, but we're going to decommission next 2 decades almost 20 gigawatts of the current sources of energy, which comes from coal-fired plants. So same time we have increase of the energy from 170 terawatt hours to 240 terawatt hours and going to decommission coal-fired plants. It's opening a gap between energy demand and production, almost 20 gigawatts in the middle of 30s in Poland. So that's a first big problem for us, which we're going to solve. Second is decarbonization and electrification, question mark, of industrial process, of steel production, of chemical production, and also of the district heating. Poland has largest district heating networks in Europe. After Moscow, Warsaw has second largest district heating plant in Europe with 5 gigawatts thermal. All Poland consumes 55 gigawatts of thermal energy just for the district heating. 60 million people is connected to the grid. So the question is how you can decarbonize, how you can make electrification of such large grids. By the way, I believe strongly that combined heating plants and district heating is something amazing. It's something very good and can be very, very green also. You just have to replace the source of the energy from the coal-fired plant, which is now to SMRs. That's what we believe. So we actually, as a Orlen Synthos Green Energy, we preparing ourselves for deployment of the fleet of boiling water reactors, boiling water reactor BWR 300, for several reasons: for industrial production, for district heating, and we believe also for steel production.
How much capacity are we talking about there?
So we get approval, decision in principle from Polish government to build 24 units of WX 300, which is 300 megawatts. But I think that country needs much more in perspective on next 15, 20 years. Will require to have additional 20 gigawatts of baseload in Poland, so there is a lot of space still. 24 reactors is what we get in approval from the government in the form of decision principle. But our customers, other investors, then frankly speaking, they're asking questions all the time: how many units you can build? We need them all now.
Good. Okay, so from Poland to Finland, not a very far jump. District heating, Iaea, your project sounds very groundbreaking in many ways, even as we know nuclear does provide district heating in other countries, including in the region. What drove you to the idea that SMRs was going to be the solution here, and what sort of challenges are sort of first order ones are that you still need to address to get there?
Yeah. Well, as said, our target is to become not only CO2 free, but also combustion free and protect the biodiversity. I think that will be anyway the thing that we all need to turn the focus on now, more or less. CO2 is on everybody's lips, but the biodiversity becomes more and more important. So that's in that respect, I think nuclear in general provides an excellent solution, at least in theory. We have a very small ecological impact. Land use is very small. Raw material use is very small compared to the energy produced. So nuclear is kind of perfect solution in that sense. SMRs comes for us now mainly for the scale. So the scale of energy need that we have, SMR suits better that. But also, to be honest, I think acceptability is one thing that influences. There is a certain hype and belief in that SMRs will be a bright future. So that is something that we also will utilize in our project. And to kind of the second, how others could utilize from this and what challenges we might have. So I think the main, for district heating in general, I think nuclear is an excellent solution. We have not only challenges, there is a huge opportunity since nuclear reactors primarily produce heat. So using for district heating is an excellent way of increasing the efficiency of the plant in general. And maybe in some cases when you go to heat-only reactors, it's also simplicity. But then the challenges is, of course, that we want to get close to the population centers in general. That's for the economical reasons then needed as well. Of course, there need to be a balance, strike a balance there at what is a safe, well justified location, and then but close enough that it's economically for the district heating network to build the pipelines and the tunnels to the power plant. So I guess that's a common challenge that we and others will have when employing nuclear for district heating.
Very good. Do you have like public opinion data that's showing that people in Helsinki or Finland are more favorably disposed towards SMRs as opposed to large nuclear reactors?
I think that there is not directly on that respect. There is not public data. There is the nuclear opinion is very strong now in Finland, but there is, I can see that there is indications toward that the SMRs are the thing that are more favorable opinions against.
Very good. Okay, so very good. Moving on to transportation and aviation in particular, Sarah. Fly Green Alliance, as you said, supports the use of SMRs to help produce clean aviation fuels, let's say, or synthetic aviation fuels. You know, how could such a development help support or even strengthen the business case for SMRs? Let's say particularly in light of what we've seen in recent days, including the Microsoft 3 Mile Island arrangement, where I think we're looking at a price of around $100 per megawatt hour, maybe a little bit more. It's been reported in the press.
Yeah, so some of the figures, so we are currently using globally about 360 million metric tons of aviation fuel. By 2050, it's going to be around 500 million metric tons. So already, without, as DG Grossi said, let's keep it simple. You can do some simple maths there and understand that we are not going to be, we're not going to need a lot more energy. Globally, of course, we are all looking at condensing our travel, but we are a growing nations, and we are going to be traveling. So e-fuels are a very good option for aviation. It is a bit of a golden bullet right now. There are lots of bio-based sustainable aviation fuels, or SAFs, that are now, like I mentioned, with the Norwegian Armed Forces and Norwegian Airline case study, it's bio-based fuels, it's used cooking oils. But there's, of course, a limit to that kind of feedstock. If e-fuels can come online, which, of course, SMRs can then be part of that process. SMRs can provide either the heat or decarbonize electricity at a much lower cost. The problem with e-fuels at the moment is sometimes they're costing about 10 times as much or more than a standard ton of Jet A1. So it's all of the kind of economics are there. As I was mentioning, there isn't a great deal of interest. I mean, it started to come. Now I was on the panel in June at WNA. Already people have said, yes, SMRs have said aviation and SAF is very interesting to us. And OEMs, some airlines have started to say, we are starting to look at this. So I think all in all, there is, you're looking at replacing a lot of fossil-based fuel, and the e-fuels, as Scott was mentioning, is very favorable. It's a case of having those offtakes in place, which we will work on. Like we did with SAF itself 5 years ago, there was no offtakes. I think there was maybe Virgin Atlantic 10 years ago or something like this, but since then there's been a lot of offtakes. You have to make the market. It doesn't exist. So this is the, June and today is the kind of first stages of making that market, and it's hard work. So we're here to speak to. I will go to the industry night tomorrow, speak to all of the SMR developers and be part of that process with Fly Green Alliance and then all of our networks. So I'm not sure if I answered your question there, but yeah, these are our topics and this is what we're working to.
All right, yet another reason to attend Industry Night tomorrow to forge the future of aviation. So from the skies to the sea, Scott, nuclear marine propulsion or marine applications of nuclear energy are very much sort of in the news these days. You mentioned some of that yourself. The DG himself alluded to it in some of his remarks today. Both for floating or transportable nuclear power plants and also propulsion. What is it about the technology and what are the benefits here as far as the nuclear technologies?
Right. I mean, yeah, why nuclear as opposed to something else? I mean, as Sarah just mentioned a little bit, from the e-fuels and just looking at the general physics, chemistry of e-fuels, it takes a lot more energy to make those than you actually get out of it from utilizing them. So the nuclear industry and, floating nuclear plant or something like that is going to be using an SMR is going to be much more efficient than using some other technology to make those e-fuels. That's a big part of the reason why they're looking at it. We've also had some interest from people in the extraction industries who are perhaps out in various bodies of water where they end up extracting a lot of fossil fuels, and it takes a lot of refinement of those fossil fuels, and they have to be shipped back to the very platform in order to continue to operate those platforms. So in that case, it makes a lot of sense to maybe put SMR, a floating SMR out there and utilize that. So then you will cut down on the amount of consumption of fossil fuels by doing it that way. You know, from a propulsion industry, you know, there's certainly a benefit to it from the fact that there have been over 700 floating nuclear reactors used for nuclear propulsion throughout the world up until now over the last 70 years. So there are a lot of carbon taxes that are starting to come out that are going to start having some financial impacts to go along with the environmental impacts that already exist from using fossil fuels. So a lot of people in the maritime industry are going to have to start looking at the calculus on the pricing being, yes, we realize that putting a nuclear propulsion unit in my ship is going to be more expensive than putting a diesel engine in it. But if you look at the lifetime operating costs over time, it's going to be less expensive because you don't have to deal with constant refueling, you know, bunkering, doing all those sorts of things. So I think people realize that they're going to have to spend a little bit more upfront in the capital costs, but there's going to be a payoff, and in the long run, it's going to be more cost-effective to go nuclear than to do either an e-fuel where you're going to constantly be rebunkering it or something else. So I think that's where a lot of the appeal and attractiveness of what we're trying to do is coming from.
Good. So back to the steel industry. You know, I think we can imagine, we've heard some of the, you know, the benefits that nuclear and small modular reactors can bring to the industry. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? And could you possibly tell us a little bit about, like, at what stage do you feel these discussions are within the industry? And are there any, what are the alternatives that are being discussed, if any?
You might have come across a few news articles that some steel companies, they are thinking of deploying the SMRs, but I think from the implementation perspective, there is still quite a lot of way to go. But all of those, they are really being driven by policy. Because when the governments, they make those climate pledges, all of those instructions, they are somehow top-down. And when it comes to the implementation of that, and that is only left to the industries, respective industries. But there is a feedback, kind of a loop that goes on there, because investing in those energy sources, SMRs, is quite a big challenge for an industry like the steel industry, because our profit margins, they are very, very low. So unless you are in partnership with an energy company, with other investors, these things are a big challenge. And a bit of policy initiative, as well as the partnerships across the industries, can make that change possible. For a single industry alone, it's a very big challenge.
Okay. And Rafael, in your context in Poland, you've talked a little bit about the particular SMR technology that you're looking to deploy. What is it about this light water reactor technology that you think is advantageous for district heating in particular, and what is that the primary use you see for it, or what other applications are you looking at?
So since the beginning, we look for the solution which is feasible and can be deployed the beginning of 30s. I'm talking about commercial operation. and we believe that with current schedule, we may submit license to construct in Poland in 2026, early 2027, and receive license to construct, start construction before the end of this decade. So we still believe that we can be in the early 30s with this technology to the market. So it's possible with the light water reactors, with boiling water reactor BWX300, because it has this proven technology, it has existing supply chain. And we have excellent partners, General Electric and Hitachi, with large supply chains, not only in Poland, but also in Spain, for example. Nusa produce fuel, which is licensed for in Europe already. We chose light water reactors and BWX300 because it's a solution which can be faster to the market. And we can use it for district heating, because in district heating we don't need high temperature steam, we just need hot water. It's 100-degree water, and boiling water reactor BWX300 has 240 degrees, so more than we need for district heating. We believe that this technology is much more easy to license. It's well known for the regulator. We already have cooperation with CNSC in Canada, with NSC. Boiling water reactors are in Spain, in Switzerland, in Sweden, in Europe. So the technology is well known. Frankly speaking, with fourth generation, it's very visionary, a little bit magical thinking still from my perspective. I have to keep the foot on the ground because I represent money for my investors, so they ask me every day how much money we burn. So we believe that in the beginning of 30s, it's feasible to deploy several SMRs in Poland for district heating, for steel production. One of our sites is next to the ArcelorMittal factory in Poland, so largest steel producer, one of the largest steel producer in the world. Also for chemical plants, two of our sites are next to the Synthos, which is the largest synthetic rubber producer in Europe, and to Anvil, which is one of the largest chemical companies in Europe. So we have a diversification of sites with industrial, district heating, and energy production as a main target for early 30s. It's why we developed a programmatic approach, and we would like to have a fleet of reactors developed same time on several sites.
You mentioned regulatory cooperation. I think on this technology, there's something going on between the U.S. and Canada, maybe UK, and Poland is involved in that at some level as well?
I believe Poland will be involved very soon. Right now, Poland is an observer in the group called Five Parties. It's collaboration between NSC, TVA, OPG from Canada, and NSC, CNSC from Canadian regulator, ONR from UK, and Polish regulator as an observer in this group. And it's great because it's a real opportunity, again, to be very realistic, very pragmatic. Harmonization of the regulations will not happen fast. So to have this cooperation between regulators, it's only way to deploy these reactors and license this reactor fast.
Right, very good. Sarah, back to you. You mentioned you're going to talk to some SMR vendors tomorrow night, but surely you've spoken with them already. What are they showing interest in using this technology for these e-fuels, as you call them, and what are they asking for sort of to get these projects moving forward?
Yeah, I have spoken to some SMR developers, and yeah, they are definitely interested in aviation as an end user. I've also spoken, and also recently, because I've been in the Nordics, there's a lot of e-fuel production coming online. One of the e-fuel producers who was still in, they're a startup mode. So we know now that Microsoft did a 20-year offtake for $100 per megawatt hour. One of the e-fuel producers is asking for €20 per megawatt hour, so obviously that's a lot less. So it's basically given us we're starting to get to some figures, And of course, it helps at least to put, now Microsoft has done that. We've got a figure to look at. 20 euros per hour is now looking a lot lower. But it gives, it's a playground essentially. Here's some figures that we can now put into some models and work through. Can you ask a question again? Sorry, what did you?
The other part was like, what are they asking you for? What are they, to move the project forward?
What are they asking? Well, for off-takers essentially.
Yeah.
So there is one SMR developer that has grown from 30 to 800 employees in the last 18 months. So they're very serious about scaling up. So of course, what they want is then in their 2033 planners, who are our off-takers. Of course, it is going to support further investment. It's going to support politically everything. It will support. So they want information about, of course, market intelligence. They want to know the figures such as what % of SAF or e-fuels is going to be needed. They want to know about the mandates that are in place. As in the EU, there's a 2% mandate for SAFs 2025, 10% by 2030, and 75% by 2050. So there is a staggered growth. So there is already the market from a mandate point of view. The example that I was using with Norwegian Armed Forces was a voluntary commitment. So the topics are around voluntary versus regulatory. Of course, regulatory makes the market. However, probably a true acceleration is going to be voluntary commitments. So what also we do is aggregation. So this one case study is one example of a SAF aggregator. If we can then gather further, case studies and off-takes, this is a successful market-making program. So these are the types of conversations that are happening right now. It is policy interest. So in Q1 next year, we're going to put an aviation-based event on in London. So I'm also working with aviation insurers, brokers, corporate travelers. So we will be inviting these groups, and also there are groups that are working with the aviation departments of banks. So we will gather all of our network and those that essentially will be either off-takers, investors, or the SMR developers themselves. So we basically need to put that supply chain together. So of course, we are here at the events now, which are across all different sectors, but we will, because we are Fly Green Alliance, so even by our name, we were very certain that we needed to bring stakeholders together because we're really attempting to displace a very big fossil fuel market. So we'll bring our group of aviation-focused stakeholders together then, and then with that desire and aspiration to essentially put the deals together and get those off-takes moving. Like, of course, Google and Microsoft have always been the leaders. And actually, a few years ago, we were all in a very nascent stage in 2018, and then Microsoft was even coming to me saying, what are you doing in sustainable aviation fuel? So we've been kind of all part of this Buyers Alliance development. Now Microsoft have got their own Buyers Alliance, and there's all sorts of kind of groups coming online in SAF. So I imagine now Microsoft has off-taken nuclear. They may think of it for their Buyers Alliance in SAF as well. So there's all sorts of kind of work that's already been happening in this area to aggregate these off-takes, but now I think we can accelerate that for eSAFs, and it will go hand in hand with maritime. It will be, of course, with e-fuels, it's capturing carbon, and for aviation, we're making hydrocarbons, hydrocarbon-based fuels. That's what kerosene is. So we have lots of CO2, we have hydrogen from water, if we can use the decarbonized electricity from nuclear to make that truly decarbonized fuel, then we've got a very good circular economy there, and that's what we can use for aviation in the future.
Okay, very good. So back to the maritime world then. Both these gentlemen here have used the word magical thinking a couple of times, I think. Not to say that that's magical thinking, but actually just a few years ago, SMRs, land-based SMRs, or maybe some would have thought that those were magical thinking. But what's it going to take to get to accelerate the deployment of marine SMRs, let's say, and what are the main, some of the main roadblocks or route blocks?
Okay, all right, thanks. Well, I mean, right now in the maritime environment, it's if we're going to build nuclear propulsion into ships, it's most likely not going to be using PWR technology. We're going to have to use some of the other technologies that are under development here for SMRs. The reason being, if you're doing a commercial ship, it's going to be very difficult to get insurance for a PWR that comes in with greater than 1,000 PSI into a port, and if there's a leak or something like that, you're going to have a very large emergency planning zone. So we think that we're going to have to get moving on some of the more novel technologies and get that approach going through regulatory bodies and getting approvals from them. So obviously, if you're building a floating nuclear power plant platform, you can use PWRs in select scenarios. It just is going to depend on the location. So in order to do some of these new technologies, what you're going to have is clear set of rules and regulations. So the people out building and designing, I should say, the plants right now need to have a clear set of rules to follow. It's not crystal clear how the maritime regulations for how much it's going to pitch and bob and do all of that apply to the seismic siting criteria that nuclear power plants of a terrestrial origin have. So there's got to be some sort of a regulatory development where both the nuclear regulations and the maritime regulations come together. I will note that the Iaea has started development of this Atlas initiative. I believe the first meeting is going to be next year, which stands for Atomic Technology License for Application at Sea. So that Atlas project will be a step down the path to be able to get that to happen. So that's the first regulatory development activity. And of course, those regulations have to look at nuclear safety. I mean, that's clearly a part. They also have to look at nuclear security. I mean, that's another area, because when I've gone and talked to people over the years about what we're trying to do with floating nuclear, I get three questions out of the audience pretty much every time. One has to do with waste, one has to do with what sinks, and one has to do what if terrorists get their hands on it. So you're going to have to be able to come up with clear nuclear security requirements and regulations and approaches that are going to be accepted by the the global community, because nobody's going to want that to come into their port if there's a potential problem with that. Of course, going along with that is also nuclear safeguards. I mean, that's something that has to be incorporated into the design of this. So, those are all aspects that have to be accounted for as we're going. Then we need to have regulatory harmonization. There have been a couple of civilian nuclear plants that were developed by the United States and Germany and Japan and the Russians back in the 60s and 70s. But there was a very difficult time for those ships to get into any port. We found some of the paperwork in the archives of various dusty vaults somewhere, where it talks about taking over 12 months to get approval for a nuclear ship to come into a port, because you have to go through all of the hoops that you have to do that. That's not going to be something that's practical to make this happen on a large-scale system. So there needs to be a regulatory harmonization too, because some of those nuclear ships were licensed in one country, but another country wouldn't accept it in there. I have a lot of experience in my career in transport, and there is a way to get other countries to approve a shipping container that's been developed and approved by one regulator, but when you're going to a second regulator, they still want to take a look at it and go. And so that's going to be quite challenging from a nuclear propulsion standpoint. And the last thing that goes hand in hand with the insurance that we talked about is nuclear liability convention. I mean, we have the Paris Convention, we have the Vienna Convention that cover nuclear liability, but they do not apply to nuclear propulsion. If we're going to make this a reality, there needs to be some initiative to make that happen. So hopefully that comes through, the Atlas program. That's going to be something that's going to be looked at. And then this new NGO, the Nuclear Energy Maritime Organization, NEMO, is going to be working on that. But that clearly comes to the member states of all the countries have to be very engaged and involved with doing that. So.
Very good. Well, a lot of issues to cover there. Okay, so one last question back to you, Iaea, in Finland. District heating is used in some countries, but it's not a very extensive, let's say, a technology. But what kind of business case do you see for the SMR-driven district heating in Finland? Is it cost effective? And do you see that it's something that could sort of be replicated in other countries?
Yeah, that's, I would say that is also one of the motivations why we look at it. It's our customers, consumers, businesses, they are mainly driven by economical factors, and we believe that by nuclear we will be able to actually provide even more competitive district heating in Helsinki. So for business case it looks kind of promising in that sense, and I think it's also related to the fact I mentioned earlier that it's kind of the direct product from a nuclear reactor is the heat, so you get it kind of directly. If you have a combined heat and power reactor, and you for 1 megawatt of electricity you can get 4 to 5 megawatts of heat with the same kind of amount of switching it to electricity, switching it to heat. I mean, so in that case also it's very kind of interesting from business perspective.
Okay. Well, a very concise answer. We are approaching we've got about 10 minutes left, I think, in our regular schedule here. I would have one more question for everybody that we planned, but I could possibly skip that in order to go to some questions to the floor, if there are any, before we conclude with remarks again from King of the World Nuclear Association. So maybe I'll try that if there are questions. So we'll start. I see two on this side. First, and please, if you could identify yourself as well.
Thank you. Abel Gonzalez from the Argentine Regulatory Authority. I will refer to the SMRs for Navy propulsion. I would like to recall that exactly 53 years ago, say more than half a century ago, the Otto Hahn ship has probably what was one of the first SMRs for Navy propulsion, and it entered the Buenos Aires docks. And the regulatory authority did an enormous work. The licensing was nearly 2 volumes, because the Buenos Aires dock is a very complicated dock, and it is very near a very big city, etc., etc., etc. Now, few years after, the reactor of the Otto Hahn had to be taken away from the ship, and a normal propulsion was included. Why? Because most captains of ports all around the world simply would not accept the Otto Hahn entering into the port. Now, my question is, what have changed now? Do you really believe that the captains half a century after have a different idea? They have exactly the same power than before. They are a problem for the denial of shipment, for instance. Therefore, who will invest in a peaceful nuclear power, a peaceful nuclear ship? The Otto Hahn was for transporting grain, wheat, maize, corn. I am not talking of icebreakers, I am not talking of military ships. I am talking of a very simple ship to transport normal things. what has been changed now? And therefore I invite my friend from an IMO to answer that question. Thank you.
Are you with the IMO?
Yeah, well, yeah, actually, yeah, Core Power, not IMO. But yeah, I mean, that's why I mentioned that, using the PWR technology, there's a large emergency planning zone around a PWR. And so going with the new SMR technology that's inherently safe, will shut down safely, should not have a large emergency planning zone around it, is going to be part of the solution and why they're going to do it. Yeah, is there going to be what I used to call public fear and superstition that is engaged around nuclear? Yes, there is. So there's clearly going to have to be education and training of not only the operators who are going to operate, these ships, but also the general public who is going to have to realize, oh, that ship that's coming in, boy, how does that compare to that liquid natural gas tanker that comes in that if it goes off will devastate in a mile radius around it? I mean, those are the sorts of conversations and education discussions that we need to have. Is it a simple solution? No. I mean, that's why we don't have nuclear now and haven't had a lot of the nuclear ships except for icebreakers over the last 50 years. But I think with the technology that's going to be talked about at this conference, I think there are opportunities to do it. But yeah, it's there's going to be holdouts. There are going to be from denials of shipments and other things. There are going to be plenty of people who are reluctant, and there's probably going to be only a small number of ports that are willing to accept nuclear ships to begin with until you build up the track record and the experience that shows that you can do it. I mean, I would anticipate the initial use of these would be through some sort of a green corridor where there's 1 or 2, 3, 4 stops along the way where each of those ports have gone through the voluminous regulatory background and gotten it. But, I think the time is now because we do need to address the climate change, and this is the best way to do it.
Quickly, though. Yeah. Maybe just quickly, if you.
Only to support. I was at a conference with the Port of Rotterdam the other day, and this year was discussing their evolution as a port, as an ecosystem and a facilitator, and it's not on their agenda yet. But I have started you have to start these conversations, and I think their difficult agenda is how to store ammonia and all these other topics. But of course, it's a step-by-step process.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I think we have only about 4 minutes left, and we still have concluding remarks to make. So I think we might have to wrap up the questions at this point. So at this point, I'd like to thank our panelists. Thank you very much for your contributions. If you could please give them a round of applause. I would also just remind all of you, you know already, but starting in a few minutes, we will have a reception, and hope to see many of you there. At this point, I think we can leave the stage and let King Lee of the World Nuclear Association conclude this panel with a few remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to all the panelists for such an engaging, insightful discussion. I think we heard these industries are essential for service that's critical to our daily lives. And we heard the potential for nuclear to decarbonize these sectors in terms of both grid and district heating and process heat, and for industry and transport, and making transport fuel. Perhaps I will highlight, there are many different types of SMR technology that's available, and how these different types of SMR technology offer the solution to different end users' need. As already been mentioned, the World Nuclear Association is co-organizing with IAEA the industry night tomorrow. So I look forward for all of you joining us tomorrow evening to learn more about these particular technology. So in particular, the momentum for nuclear energy is now, and the demand opportunity is now. So we need to accelerate the development and the deployment of SMR technology. Perhaps, the nuclear industry need to work together to ensure that all the enabler like financing, supply chain, and particular workforce are in place to allow us to deploy it at scale. Perhaps to highlight the opportunity, the urgency available to nuclear energy, I want to borrow the title from one of my favorite films. To solve the global energy challenge, we need nuclear, everything, everywhere, all at once. But maybe not all at once, maybe at least to be at pace. So I see nuclear energy, and in particular advanced technologies like SMR, had a huge role to play. So with that, I'd like to thank to the panelists and IAEA for hosting this event, and thank you very much.